This is a microphone test for the Performance, Assets and Strategy Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which will begin at 5:30.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Performance, Assets and Strategy Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 9th of December at 5:30, 2005 at Cambridge City Council. My name's Councillor Katie Porrer and I'm the chair of this committee. As most of you know, we have one main item on the agenda this evening, which is inviting our guests from the Cambridge Growth Company. So I'd like to welcome in particular all of them, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a moment so everybody knows who's who. We also have members of Cabinet in attendance, so Councillor Holloway and Councillor Thornborough, as well as Councillor Nestor and Councillor Wade online. And we're also joined by our Chair and Vice Chair of our Services, Climate and Community Scrutiny Committee. We have opposition leaders, Councillor Bick and Councillor Bennett. Councillor Bick is online and I think Councillor Bennett will hopefully be joining us shortly. And we have some ward councillors in attendance as well. Could I first ask if we've had any apologies for absence, please, Dan?
Thank you, Chair. I've had no apologies for absence.
Thank you. And does any member have a declaration of interest they would like to raise now? Councillor Davey?
I think I should really declare that I was involved in the advisory council to the Growth Company up until May of this year, so I have had dealings with Peter and his team.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davey. And obviously, members can raise any declaration of interest at any point in the meeting should something come up. Oh, apologies, Councillor Holloway.
Well, in that case, I should say I am currently on the advisory council.
Thank you very much. And you're here in that capacity as well as being leader of the council. Could members please note that the minutes have come through. I'm proposing to sign those off unless anyone has any objections or corrections. I'm taking that as assent. Thank you very much. So they will be approved for the record from the meeting on the 9th of September. Item 4 is public questions, and we've had one public question submitted this evening from Mr. Carpen, which has been published on the council's website and which I believe my colleague Sarah will put up on the screen. I think I'll take public questions first and then we'll go round and do all the introductions immediately after that, as it's probably more pertinent to the major item, if that's okay. Could I ask Mr. Carpen, I can see you're here in the room, would you like to put forward your question, please? You will have, read your question.
Anthony Carpen, local resident question.
Yeah. Your question is on the screen. And I will ask Councillor Cameron Holloway as the leader and also our representative on the advisory board to respond to that. And you will then have a supplementary question for up to a minute, and Councillor Holloway can then have another 2 minutes to respond. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll respond to some of the points, then hand over to Councillor Thornborough for a minute or so. So on the urban centre, we do consider urban centres and community facilities as part of our local plan making process, and we would expect that if the Growth Company is to be planning new towns, new urban areas, then they would do the same and would have regard to the importance of community facilities. To me, as it stands, the Cambridge East site is a potential obvious site, but that's to be considered further as we work on the emerging local plan and, of course, as the Growth Company look at their continued work. The new large concert hall, I know, is something that you, Mr. Carpen, have long talked about, and it's great to see that in the local growth plan. Worth noting that the City Council is also exploring options for investing significantly in the Corn Exchange as we come to its 150th year, but also looking at a significant upgrade to the Cambridge Junction facilities. So we are aware that there's a need to upgrade our cultural offers in the city. On your question about skills, we need the growth of Cambridge to work for local young people, and we've got to have opportunities for all young people and support them into those opportunities, which is why we've just started the Included programme, which will look to make sure every young person in Cambridge, no matter their background, does have those chances. I hand over briefly to Councillor Thornborough.
Yes, John Parry Lewis is an interesting report, and thank you for highlighting that. It is, as Cameron was saying, the Cambridge East development is in that area, and we have yet to see a master plan, but that will need a centre there, so it would be very interesting to see exactly where that is. And world-class transport hubs, yes, we would like every train station and every park and ride to become world-class transport hubs. Certainly the train stations we are expecting, including the alterations to Cambridge City, they'll be most accessible stations in Britain. They will allow for active travel, public transport and integrated ticketing. So we have high expectations about what will be provided by the new stations and how we can improve the existing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillors Holloway and Thornborough. Mr Carpenter, do you have a supplementary question? You have 1 minute, if so.
Thank you. I guess my remarks are addressed at Mr Freeman and colleagues, as well as all of yourselves. Matt says, can we have a coffee, please? Now, one of the things that worries me is vision. And this was raised in the MP's debate in Parliament last week. They're saying that when investors come to them, they don't really know who's in charge. And one of the things that Andy Williams, formerly of AstraZeneca, said is that previous generations of development did not deliver the infrastructure. Given that Mr Freeman has been charged by the Minister for Housing to deliver an extension of Cambridge in more than one direction on top of what's already in the local plan, my concern is we are not going to get what John Parry Lewis said we needed, which was that second urban centre. Finally, I remain concerned that ordinary residents are not getting the chance to really speak to not just Mr Freeman and the Growth Company himself, but actually to cross-examine the lobbyists and the developers who are putting forward
Mr
horrific plans.
We're just running over a minute, so if you could draw it to a close, that'd be brilliant.
And to finish on that point on the research, again, I commend everyone to the work of local academic Cleo Valentine and her work on neuroarchitecture, because at the moment, too many of the developments are making me mentally ill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Carpenter. Councillor Holloway and or Councillor Thornborough, would you like to respond, please? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much for that supplementary question. So for me, what's been really encouraging about the letters from Matthew Pennycook and his announcements, as well as the public announcements from Mr Freeman, have been the focus on this being infrastructure-led, and that is really important. And we need to make sure that that's not just about roads or busways or rail, kind of the big infrastructure. It's also about community infrastructure and community facilities. And we know that as Cambridge has grown, as more people have come to live and work here, there has been more and more pressure on community facilities in and around Cambridge. And a really important part of the high quality of life that Peter has said he wants to see and that we all want to see for the area is making sure that we have really good quality community facilities. So absolutely right to raise that. For us, the main way of getting to that point and of planning things out in a really effective way is our emerging local plan. And so I would encourage, I'm sure you are already looking at it, Mr Carpenter, in greater detail than any of us probably, but the emerging local plan is now out for public consultation. I would encourage anyone watching or listening to this to get involved, have your say on the policies there, because there's some really good work there. This is about the future of the city and surrounding area, and it's your chance to have a say. And we've got 100 different in-person events going on as part of the consultation process, as well as the opportunity to comment online. That's that side of it. The Growth Company, of course, will have to have additional work for anything that comes forward separately, but that's still to be done in the future. And of course, we would expect that they would be doing significant public consultation. I think that is really important. So thank you very much for raising that issue.
Thank you very much, Councillor Holloway. And obviously members have heard the public questions supplementary, as I'm sure have Cambridge Growth Company, so people may wish to address things in the debate later. So we now move on to item 5, which is an update for Cambridge City Council by the Cambridge Growth Company. What I propose is I'm going to ask members of the committee to introduce themselves, and then officers, and then if it's okay, Cambridge Growth Company as well, if you'd be willing to just say who you are and kind of what capacity you're here in, that would be much appreciated. Can I start, please, with Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood?
I'm Councillor Jenny Gawthorpe-Wood. I'm obviously Vice Chair here, and I'm a Ward Councillor for King's Hedges.
Thank you, Councillor.
Hello, I'm Councillor Pounds. I'm Ward Councillor for Romsey and I'm Mayor of Cambridge.
Hugh Clough, City Councillor for Newnham Ward. Thank you.
Mike Davies, City Councillor for Petersfield Ward.
Jamie Dale, City Councillor for West Chesterton.
Patrick Shield, Albury Councillor.
Tim Griffin, Coleridge Councillor.
And just for those are the members of the Performance Assets and Scrutiny Committee, so the voting members tonight, and then now move to the members of our sister committee.
Beth Gardner-Smith, Councillor for Romsey Ward, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Services, Climate and Communities Committee.
Karen Young, Queen Edith's Councillor and Chair of the Services Communities Committee. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And then obviously Councillor Thorpe.
I'm Councillor Katie Thornborough, Ward Councillor for Petersfield and Cabinet Member for Planning and Transport.
Councillor Cameron Holloway, Leader, Cambridge City Council, and Newnham Ward Councillor.
Lynn and Stephen, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Lynn Miles, Director of Economy and Place, Cambridge City Council.
Good evening, Stephen Kelly, Joint Director of Planning for Greater Cambridge.
And then, yeah, go ahead.
Good evening, Peter Freeman, Chair of the Cambridge Growth Company.
Beth Dugdale, Deputy Chief Executive of the Cambridge Growth Company.
Katie Brown, Senior Public Affairs and Engagement Manager at the Cambridge Growth Company.
Chris Pike, Head of Legal, Cambridge Growth Company.
Jim Ward, Market Demand Advisor at Cambridge Growth Company.
I'm Karen Clark, I'm Head of Strategic Communications at Cambridge Growth Company.
And Nathan Veer, Environment and Sustainability Advisor at the Cambridge Growth Company.
Thank you very much. And I believe we have one member, Anthony, online who's joining us as well. So welcome to Anthony. Oh, he's giving us a wave. Thank you very much. Do you want to say just in what capacity you're here, Anthony, please?
Of course, Chair, thank you. Anthony Hollingsworth, I'm Director of Planning and Place at the Cambridge Growth Company, and apologies for not being able to be with you.
Thank you very much. That's not a problem. I'm very glad you could join us online. So we also are joined by, we've got various Cabinet members here. I can see Councillor Simon Smith. I can see Cabinet Member Councillor Martin Smart, although he's here in his capacity as Ward Councillor. Councillor Dave Bajan, again a Ward Councillor, Councillor Blackburn Horgan, who's here as Ward Councillor. And we also have Councillor Tim Bick online, who's leader of the Liberal Democrat opposition group. And I think that's everybody. My eyesight is not good enough to see who else is online, but as far as I know, that's everybody. So welcome. So for the first part, Cambridge Growth Company very kindly agreed to put forward a presentation for us just to talk about some of the kind of strategic and high-level issues that I hope we'll be able to debate this evening. So if I could hand over to Katie, who's very kindly going to project that up for us, that would be great. Thank you very much. It's up on the screen now. So Beth and Peter, are you happy to lead on that? Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting us. Most of this will be a two-hander between me and Beth, but we might go back to the second row and Anthony on the screen to show the strength in depth and all the kind of technical expertise. So who is the Cambridge Growth Company is the first question. What are we doing and what does good look like? And why will government consult on a development corporation? And how could it deliver positive change? The Growth Company goes back a couple of years now, and I've personally been coming up to Cambridge probably at least one day a week and more frequently 2 or 3 days a week for a couple of years. So I know many of you in the room, and I am incredibly grateful for the support that we've received locally because especially after Michael Gove dropped a sort of time bomb in the Sunday Times, we could have been thrown out as bandits and pirates before we'd started. We are not bandits and pirates. We are profoundly committed to building good places and for those being infrastructure-led. My own personal career in development before I went to be chair of Homes England was very much about mixed-use regeneration, where building public squares came always first before any buildings were finished or occupied, build the public square. And I really do believe that there is a virtuous circle in which development that is good for a community, is good for a town, is actually commercially good. And I think too often developers think that there is one use that's the valuable use, whether it's private housing or whether it's life science buildings. And actually, the local school or the conference centre or the hotel or the leisure centre or the public park are all part of what makes something valuable. So if you want to make something commercially successful, you've got to make it good, you've got to make it mixed use, there's got to be public open space. And that's a credo for me. And to do it well, you have to gather a team of people who are expert and committed for the long term. And as we talk through, I think one of the important cases for development cooperation is that it can be longer term than the electoral cycle, the political cycle, and the economic cycle. When I set the business plan for King's Cross, basically we set it 3 years before we had planning. It's taken us 17 years to build out, and the business plans never really changed. All the kind of parameters of how you financed it, what the mix of uses were immutable. Which building came first or second changed a lot, but the overall content was the same. And so as a growth company, and if we become a development corporation, I think our first job is to help Stephen, who probably doesn't need much help, having just won Best Planning Department of the Year, but to help Stephen and all of you with central government to give you a longer term remit and to be able to focus on doing things that are hard, because funding infrastructure that's meant to last 25 years, front-ended in the first 6 or 7 years, is hard, but it's possible. And I said to sort of Mike and Bridget when I first started coming up here, if I can't do that, then I don't want to do it. And I'll say to government, you haven't delivered your side of the bargain. So in selling that side of the bargain to government, I have to persuade them, and I think I'm persuading them, that that the upfront infrastructure will pay dividends. If government wants Cambridge to grow, if it wants more world-class scientists to come here, if it wants the community to thrive, then government has to help pump prime. That's the context to why we were set up. We always wanted to be, as far as we could be, kind of insiders rather than intruders. And as soon as possible, we set up an advisory council, which is, as of right, the 4 elected leaders. And then, in addition, at the moment, there's Baroness Sally Morgan, who is chair of the hospital group, as well as master of the college. There's Sir John Ashton, who's the Vice-Chancellor for Innovation and Research. And there's Dr. Paul Leinster, who is an acknowledged expert on water. And I think this area needs an acknowledged expert on water. We hope to bring an additional person who is possibly the leading British strategic transport person onto the board shortly. And we are considering whether we should bring somebody from the kind of business and innovation community, and maybe somebody to represent, in a sense, the community in the way that something like Abbey Life does. But so through the work of the Advisory Council, we hope that we are hearing firsthand from the people who are elected to make this place work. Next slide. I think I've probably done most of this slide. Yes, I've done the people on it. Overall, I think there is a kind of virtuous connected circle where every part matters, just as the heart and the kidneys and the eyes matter. If you haven't got people who want to live here and can afford to live here, and you haven't addressed the challenges of affordable housing, you haven't got a place that can thrive. If you haven't got the training for people who are coming into work or who've been out of work, the place cannot thrive. If you haven't got leisure and culture, it cannot thrive. So it's a totally holistic view of what makes a good place to live. And stealing a sort of tagline that I got when I was in Copenhagen about 6 weeks ago, they claim to be the most livable city in Europe, and I think Cambridge can have that too. That should be our tagline and our aim. So, next slide. It's essential that the benefits of growth are felt by existing communities. Greater Cambridge must become an exemplar for sustainable development and placemaking, a model for growth that sets the bar for how our cities, towns and villages adapt to new challenges and seize opportunities. That's relevant both to our aspirations and to getting the money out of government to do them. Oxford is kind of a year behind us, good. The new towns are probably 2 years behind us. The proposal for a development corporation here is the first new development corporation in about 15 years centrally led. It's the biggest since Milton Keynes. And if the government has ambitions for Oxford and new towns, my sort of statement to them is support us here, because if we're not able to get it right here and demonstrate that we are of value to the local politicians and the local community, you might as well not start anywhere else. Beth.
Thank you, Peter. So I think government has been quite clear to us that it wants us to explore how do we realise the full potential of Cambridge. But I think that's twofold for us. One is obviously around the economic potential and the unique position that Cambridge has in the future of the growth of the country, but also how that potential can be realised in terms of sustainable and inclusive growth. And so we've been tasked with looking at a couple of areas that are set out on this slide, which I'll go on to in some future slides, which look at enabling and accelerating developments and unlocking stalled sites. But that is really, first and foremost, looking at those sites that have already been identified as priorities in the area, and we're looking to unlock where there's been stalled activity or accelerate where we can help through convening and other actions to do so. We're also developing an evidence base to underpin a spatial framework and, as we've said here, quite a lot, an infrastructure-first, infrastructure-led growth plan, which builds upon the emerging local plan. And that's been quite important, and we've certainly spoken to Minister Pennycook about the need to have that evidence base and to have that strength of approach as to how we take this forward. And we've done a lot of work with Stephen and his team to look at the evidence base that's been produced for the emerging local plan, take stock of that, and then look at, but if you're asking a different exam question around maximising the full potential of Greater Cambridge, what else might be required from an evidence perspective, and how do we start to build that together? And we're sort of in the middle of that process at the moment. And then that will enable us to lay the foundations for long-term delivery. And we are looking at a longer-term horizon. We haven't set the exact horizon, but it's certainly a minimum of 25-year programme of activity to justify and to enable us to bring forward that infrastructure-led approach. Thank you, Katie. So just to sort of touch on some of the immediate impact. So we have taken an infrastructure-led approach so far. We have been fortunate, because we are a subsidiary of Homes England, to be able to work with colleagues within Homes England and leverage some of the existing funds before the announcement on the funds for the growth company to unlock sites such as the Waterbeach site, where we've helped to fund the station relocation to unlock the 4,500 homes at Waterbeach. Obviously, one of the key focus areas needs to be water. The Cambridge Growth Company, working with colleagues in the departments, convened the Water Scarcity Group, which Dr. Paul Leinster chairs, and that has actually further enabled work around the newly set up Cross Whitehall DEFRA Water Delivery Task Force, which is helping again to just get the attention and the focus that this area needs to start to look at all of the water issues. And it's obviously much more than just water supply and the foul water issues, which I know will be on many of your minds as well at the moment. And that, to date, has helped unlock, through the Water Scarcity Group, and particularly the water efficiency work, has unlocked over 9,000 homes to date, and 500,000 square metres of commercial floor space. So we've also made quite a lot of our work has been around key sites such as the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, and we've been working with the University Hospital Trust there to bring forward the new business case for the clinical model of how to deliver a new hospital and how there can be a world-leading approach to that clinical model ahead of the sort of building the approach to building the hospital. So that work has been underway, and we funded £3 million towards the business case for that. And we've also been working on unlocking transport solutions around the Cambridge Biomedical Campus as well. So we helped to provide funding for transport solutions, which went towards the Transport and Works Act order. And we've also, again, through Homes England, been supporting the progression of that Transport and Works Act order from statements in the statement of case to help support the inspector when that goes through the process. So I think we just wanted to demonstrate that we have already taken steps to look at infrastructure, both sort of from the focus on some of the key priority sites, and we're going to continue to work with GCSP to support those priority sites and look at those that are coming through in the emerging local plan as well.
Next one. So what does good look like? I mean, I don't have one set view of one type of architecture being right. I don't know what the rest of you thought, but I was almost offended when Nicholas Boyce-Smith was putting out all of his drawings 18 months ago of everything that looked to me like Marylebone or Mayfair and saying that should be the future of Cambridge. I think this has been, on the pictures on the screen, the recent past of Cambridge, and I think it's a jolly good recent past. I think depending on where it is, what market it's aimed for, there will be greater density and lower density. There will be blocks of flats, and there will be detached houses and semi-detached houses and terraces. But I think the important thing is they are all well landscaped. They are all within walking distances of primary schools and parks and playgrounds. As far as possible, they should all be within easy cycle distance or a couple of bus stops to jobs. So one of the sort of key things for us is we are absolutely not here to try and spread the load around 100 villages. Much of planning is each village has to take its turn down another 50 or 100 or 200 houses. We are here to try and help major set pieces like Marshall's Airfield that can actually take the strain off the villages. And then from my point of view, it's up to the villages if they actually think that to help keep a school or a shop open or a bus service open, they'd like some more houses. Well, that's kind of for them to ask Stephen and colleagues, but we are not here to impose loads on villages. And what we're here to do is, as far as possible, to do the joined up large schemes where they can be infrastructure-led, where housing will come with the park and a primary school and some shops and so on. And time will tell whether more buildings are brick-clad, more buildings have flat roofs or whatever, but to me that's entirely subsidiary, as long as they look good and the overall placemaking and mix of uses is right. And within the mix of uses, it's critical that a significant amount is affordable, and that within that affordable, a significant amount is social rented. And I think the record of the council is pretty outstanding in terms of the amount of quasi-affordable housing they brought, your joint ventures with Hill. Overall, the council has been extraordinary. It has developed a higher percentage of housing relative to stock and a higher percentage of affordable than almost anywhere else in the southeast. So we're here to support that rather than to forget that it's already been achieved. Beth.
Thanks. So going forward, obviously in October we had the announcement from the government that identified £400 million worth of funding to help support the next stage of the growth company. And that involves a couple of areas which I'll touch on in this slide. So we've been exploring and working with CPCA and other local organisations and government departments to look at options for a mass rapid transit solution within the Greater Cambridge area. That work is ongoing. There will be a requirement to sort of go and procure some additional support in that space, and we're just about to get into that process. So probably won't have key updates on that until certainly early in the new year and sort of into the spring and summertime. But it's important to state that it was quite significant to achieve the support of other government departments to allow that to come forward and to have their support behind us to actually explore this for the area. So that's a helpful approach in terms of remaining with the infrastructure first principles. And then we are continuing to accelerate the water infrastructure upgrades and expand the water efficiency programme. So the Water Scarcity Group is overseeing that programme, and there are a number of other options that are being looked at, from nature-based solutions, use of reservoirs and other elements which are being explored by the Water Scarcity Group. We've also, and this was actually DSIT's funding, so in addition to the 400 million, secured grant for the University of Cambridge Innovation Hub, and the Cambridge Growth Company via Homes England has been named as an investment partner in that, and they're out to sort of progress with that scheme now, which is great. And obviously the October announcement, the Minister was also setting out his intention to consult on establishing a centrally led development corporation, and as part of that wants to, very early in the new year, be going out and securing a chief executive to help to take us into that next phase. And we have welcomed recently the inclusion of Cambridge East in the East West Rail proposals, and that again has taken quite a lot of sort of convening and working cross government to ensure that actually that can be taken into account as part of the East West Rail programme. So the next slide starts to pick up on the intention to consult on the Development Corporation and what change it would deliver. And hopefully people have already seen a place of national and global significance document, which is published on the Cambridge Growth Company's webpage if people would like to have a look at it. And really that document helps to set out, as I said earlier, that Cambridge has got such a unique position, and the potential is huge for the UK growth agenda. But equally, if the area is going to contribute and have nationally significant growth to contribute to that agenda, then we need to ensure that we are putting nationally significant infrastructure into the area, both from a social and physical perspective, to enable that to come forward. And that's really what the Development Corporation is there to help to achieve, to say, well, how can we take the longer term horizon to plan over that longer time period? How can we convene across, both with working with local partners, and you know, we've had such insight from members of the Advisory Council and the local government officers that we're working with, that we would want to continue all of that partnership work, and that will be the way to take this forward, and also respecting roles, including the Mayor's role in terms of the spatial development strategies going forwards as well. So it's really about a continuation of the partnership, but looking to ensure that national government convening power, and also the balance sheet that we will need to deliver this, and the funding mechanisms and the long-term funding for investment is secured, and also that we are maximising, leveraging public and private investment, and we are working very closely with Homes England, who've obviously got quite a strong track record in that space, in terms of particularly some of the work that is going in and being taken up now by the National Housing Bank. So it will be about using the powers that are available to a development corporation to make those targeted interventions, but to do it in a collaborative way, working with people in the area who obviously know vast amount more than we do, and we are on a steep learning curve, and we acknowledge that in terms of where the priorities are and what we need to do in a sort of phased approach, and that is why we have been talking a lot about building upon the work of the Emerging Local Plan in the first phase. So that hopefully will also, to have that sort of phased approach and build upon with the emerging local plan, working with the Mayor going forward in spatial development strategy, but also having the long-term view on a growth over a longer time period and the infrastructure required to support that will be central to the work of the Development Corporation.
Great. This is the last slide here. I'm going to begin the last slide actually by kind of in a sense reintroducing the team that Beth and I have recruited. And I think all of the people, these five and Anthony on the screen, have only been here for kind of 4 to 9 months each or something. And whatever Beth and I have been able to do over the last 2 years is so amplified because the team has gone from sort of 2.5 to 26. Wherever possible, we are trying to recruit people who live locally, who came locally. Katie went to school in Cambridge. Her father was a planning consultant in Cambridge. Her mother was a conservation officer in Cambridge. Chris is seconded from Mills and Reeve, so he's a lawyer working locally. Jim was head of the research department for Savills, which I think is the best property research department in the country, but he lives in Cambridge and he has decided to spend his dotage with us. Karen and Nathan were both recruited for us by Bridget, having worked with Bridget on, what was it called? Pan Regional Partnership. Karen is a very, very skilled comms person in the nicest, least glossy way, the actually understanding what matters to people and being able to communicate in the right language. The draft of the national strategic, significant, whatever document, it was the best first draft of anything I've ever read. Thank you, Karen. And Nathan is a sustainability expert. On the screen, Anthony was the head of planning at the London Legacy Development Corporation, which is the old Olympics. So it's that range of skills, and as far as possible, people who live or live near to Cambridge that we're recruiting. I said to Matthew Pennicott and Patrick Vallance, if you want a development corporation, it is simply not viable with less than about 50 people. So we're halfway there, and we have the budget to sort of recruit the other half in the course of next year. For it to succeed, it has to work really closely with you. It can't be seen as some sort of distant outside stick. And I think, a key job for Beth and me is, in a sense, to be an intermediary, because although ministers will come up here once or twice a year, if there's something glorious to announce, come and announce 400 million or whatever, your messages need to be reaching them kind of weekly, monthly, and we need to be doing that. And we need to be doing it not just in the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, or in Patrick Vallance's sort of science hat, but we need to get to DFT for the transport, we need to get to DEFRA for the water. And people who aren't here tonight, we've just taken from Homes England a very good civil engineer who is right on the water. We've just hired somebody with a outstanding strategic highways network and background. And while we have no desire or budget to build a team to rival Stephen's, I think, 140 people in planning, what we want to have is a few core people tightly connected to each other and to you to kind of help set the strategy and draw the strings together. If there is a development corporation, it will undoubtedly, by right, have the locally elected leaders on its board. At the moment, the expectation is either early in the new year or after the elections, we will start a statutory consultation period. Either way, we would hope that there would be an up and running planning committee by the end of next year. And it is there to serve. I think that's probably enough from us. And any questions we're happy to take or pass to Stephen and Lynn in the back row.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. And I think we're really grateful that you've brought so many of your team here, Beth and Peter, because I think hopefully it shows that you're willing to answer lots of the questions tonight, which I'm sure we'll get. This is a very busy meeting. We obviously have 8 members of the Performance Assets and Strategy Scrutiny Committee, as well as the Chair and Vice Chair, who will get priority for the questions. We will then take questions from Councillor Bennett, who's just arrived, who's the Opposition Green Leader, and Councillor Tim Bick. And we're going to go through in sections, and in a minute Sarah very kindly is going to display the order of questions, which I think I've shared with you all. And if there is time, I will try and include as many ward councillors at the end as I can. Could I please ask members to be as brief as possible? I intend to collect up some questions, so a couple of sentences for each question would be much appreciated, because otherwise we are going to run out of time. I appreciate probably the first thing on the list is going to take the longest. And again, as with officers as well, if brief answers would be much appreciated. And if someone's already asked your question, you can indicate to me with a thumbs up that you're supportive. We'll note that, and I'm sure the Cambridge Growth Company will see if people are in agreement, but it would be best, if possible, not to repeat things. Thank you very much. Can I also introduce Dan Kelly, who's running the meeting tonight? I apologise, I forgot to do that earlier. And Sarah Michael, who is our producer and doing all the technical bits. It means we can live stream this. So if members are happy, I suggest that we move to the first item on the list. So this was about the structure of Cambridge Growth Company and or the Development Corporation, local engagements, links with democratically elected representatives now, and obviously when we move to a unitary in a couple of years. So can I take questions from members of the committee first, please? Okay, we have Councillor Griffin first. Do go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not really sure if this fits into the first item, but I'd like to ask Peter what his current thoughts are on the Hartree.
Hartree was a very difficult decision for the department to make, because it had been something that was live and real for, I think, something like 7 or 8 years. And then as the closing months came, the budget, which had originally gone from asking for a 225 million grant to a 275 million grant, began to turn into a 575 million grant. And at that level, it was effectively 100,000 per plot that would ultimately be released, none of which would be released for about 5 years because of building the new place. So I think from a government that is not awash with money's point of view, that level of grant just to free up a site, not create the materially better or newer infrastructure elsewhere, was just not workable. And it was at the tail end of a programme called the Housing Infrastructure Fund, and almost everything in the Housing Infrastructure Fund, you know, the cost estimates had gone up 50%, this one had gone up 250%, so there was also a need to kind of fund others. So I think for the moment it went down. Before it went down, I went to see the Chief Executive of Anglia Water together with Dr. Paul Lancer. And we both leant on him as hard as we could to say, surely you are getting an upgrade in the capacity or the cheaper running costs or the cheaper energy costs or whatever. You know, will you lob some money on the table towards it? And he said that within his priorities, it was completely low. They would not, in part because for them to spend money, they have to be able to charge customers, and therefore they have to make the case too of what that they can charge customers for it. And he said, you know, it's not actually improving our service. I'm slightly annoyed that shortly thereafter he started blaming not moving Hartree on objecting to planning applications, but that's utility companies for you. So that's up to date. I suspect in time it will happen, but in terms of I don't know, priorities, low-hanging fruit or whatever, there's probably somewhere where you could spend 575 million better to get better transport or better public facilities than in just moving the sewage treatment works. I think also in time, as I think there's an application in or about to be in from the Cambridge Science Park for intensification.
We're working on it.
Working on it, okay. There is probably going to be densification of a number of the existing science parks there, and you know, one of my thoughts is to what extent can some of them help pick up our trees. So it's on the list, it's not dead, but it's not coming back tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got a few more questions from members of the committee first. So we've got Councillor Dale, Councillor Shield, Councillor Gorford-Wood, and then I can see Councillor Bick has got his hand up online, but I'll take members' questions first. So if I could ask Councillor Dale to ask some questions, and we may just collect up a few together to give you a chance to answer them in a bunch, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I guess one simple question really is the actual area that will be, under your remit. In particular, do you see it as being just Greater Cambridge as it currently stands? Is it specific sites or something in between? But also, I think you're obviously familiar with local government reform. So depending on how those boundaries are cut, will that make a difference on the way you operate? And how would you make sure that any local authority that will be affected by your work has, oversight and rights to have their say on it?
Thank you. Are you happy to come straight back on that, Beth? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, fine, thank you. So when we started out and commissioned the evidence base, we obviously had to ask that question: what's the geography? And the government had asked us to explore the Greater Cambridge geography. So from a sort of technical perspective at the moment, we have been working and aligning, therefore, with Stephen and the work of the Emerging Local Plan across the similar geography to get that alignment. There are obviously decisions to be made, ministerial decisions to be made going forwards about the future focus of a development corporation, and that will all form part of any consultation that occurs in that area. But we found it really beneficial to ensure that alignment so that we can look at meeting our objectives around the evidence-based, the site acceleration, and to align with the current planning work of the South Cambridge and the city. I think obviously there's a sort of almost concentric circles approach to this to some extent, because it depends about what it is you're doing in each of these geographies, and you can't do it in isolation. So we've got obviously the mayor and the remit now around the spatial development strategies and making sure that we can work together in that space so that we can have alignment and have a sort of docking in, if you like, into that spatial development strategy. But also we've got the work, and we speak to Patrick Vallance quite a lot, Minister Vallance, around the Oxcam corridor and obviously the East-West Rail project that is connecting and seeking to open up a broader area for people to be able to commute and work across the corridor. So there are different geographies that will require different action, but sort of quite specifically at the moment, our evidence-based work is looking at Greater Cambridge, and then we are also leaning into other government departments and other partners to ensure that we're not doing anything in isolation.
Thank you very much. Next, we had Councillor Shield.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Katie. Does the vision for future development, the overall vision for future development, include plenty of trees? Because even when there's a high density scheme, things can still feel lovely and spacious when we have plenty of trees.
I think the government is proposing to help finance a forest, but what sort of breaks my heart when I see most modern housing estates is there's not a single tree above the roofline. And I think when you see developers put in trees of a maximum girth of kind of 4 centimetres and then let them die because they just threw clay on top of them, trees completely make a place. The boulevard at King's Cross, we put in big plane trees on day one, and it was a place on day one. You can't afford as many trees in a less dense of that size, but plenty of trees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gawthorpe Wood, and then Councillor Davey, and then I'll move to Councillor Bick online.
Okay, so I'm trying to stick to the order there. So this is a question about really the what is perceived as a democratic deficit and how you'll engage with residents, given we've got a council, there'll be a unitary authority in a few years' time, we've got South Camps, us in the city. It's about local engagement. And all right, we're just out for consultation on the emerging local plan. And there's an awful lot of detail in there. You know, I know that you've been through most of it. And I think that you'll get, with our residents, there are going to be those who really want us to stick to the sustainability targets, or not targets, but requirements that we have for developers, for any planning applications. So if they see the LDC as a DevCo coming in, and there is a fear that you'll override things like that, I'm also a bit concerned, it's really under 2, I think, about how you'll work with the mayor if he has a different view on, put it bluntly, on the kinds of local transport that we should be promoting. Okay,
that will pick up under number 2.
Yeah, okay, so just under 1, really, it's about how you can engage with residents, how you can show that you're working with the structures that we have already in place.
Thank you.
Shall I start? And you're Karen, who's more of an expert to add to this. So, I think one of the first things to say is that and actually one of the things that Bridget Smith said to us very early on was, please respect what's happening in the local area. And as you said, there's an awful lot happening at the moment. So whilst we are very keen to have our own programme of engagement, we also want to make sure that we are doing that in a way that is complementary to the activity that is happening at the moment. We have held a couple of events. So Peter spoke to the, I'm going to forget the full name, FECRA, and did an event to start to talk through some of the principles of our work and how we're approaching it and where we are at the moment. And that really is the message that we've got at the moment. We've recently started to join in on some of the, so Councillor Holloway mentioned the Included programme, and we've started to attend some of those meetings and understand actually what's happening in that space and can we help in that area. So we're really keen to do some more work in that area. So it's really about getting the right balance at this point in time so that we can ensure that people understand the work that's going on at the moment and the sort of approach to phasing and how the Development Corporation, as and when it's consulted on, may fit into that world. But Karen, please do add to that if there's anything.
Just to say that meetings like this really matter, and us being here and being present, I think is really important. And there's always a lot more engagement that we can do. But picking up on what Beth says, as a team expands, we can go out and be speaking to lots of these groups. And actually, it's a duty and a responsibility that we will have and will continue to have to make sure that we can work with partners and colleagues to create those spaces, to engage a lot more widely and a lot more deeply, as is the expectation of residents and communities here. But we are very early on in that phase, but there is a high expectation and we will absolutely respond to that.
Thank you very much. I mean, we certainly definitely have an active resident community here that we are very keen to engage with and bring with us on whatever decisions we take. I think next we have Councillor Davey.
Mine was also going to be on, for want of a better, democratic deficit. I think the fear, and I understand why you've said this, is to do it before you do your own programme. I think that's what I would probably argue is not a good plan, in that it should be done in collaboration with us. There may well be things that you should be doing separately to us, and that's great, but we should be running alongside each other. And if we're to totally and properly own the process, we need to be doing it with you, not to be told after. I think that would be the point I'd make about the democratic deficit, and particularly, I think, around resident engagement. So the question would be, and it's not easy, I do appreciate that from long conversations we've had previously, but have you considered things like citizens' assemblies and the like, which might give you a different flavour from having a bloke or woman sitting on a committee trying to represent the whole of Cambridge? So it's about, is it too early to ask, but are you looking at that kind of innovative activity, and again, with us as opposed to separate to us? I think that's the question, I think.
I think the answer is yes. And certainly Karen has already come to Peter and myself with quite a lot of ideas about what we should be doing and how we can do that. Obviously, we'd like to test those with the Advisory Council just to ensure that they are actually aligned with the activities that are happening locally. But yes, so we do need to do more in that space, and I completely take that on board.
Thank you for the reassurance, Beth.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take one more question from Councillor Clough, and then I'm going to move to Councillor Bick, and then Councillor Gardner-Smith and Councillor Bennett. Councillor Clough, go ahead.
Without avoiding harping on the question of democratic deficit, I think the phrase "beyond the political cycle" really sort of set alarm bells ringing in my mind. I think for anybody who's working in Cambridge, I think the money that was put forward to the GCP some time ago, originally as the Cambridge deal, City deal, is an object lesson that would be worth following through in some detail. It's become an organisation which, with sort of perceived opaque governance structures and somewhat of a tainted brand. So my question is, how are you going to avoid falling into the same traps that GCP has fallen into, in my view?
I think we've taken on board a lot of feedback from perceptions of different organisations and what good looks like, and we need to make sure that we do have transparent governance. And obviously, I think that will need to follow decisions that need to be made about the form of a development corporation, and that's going to be happening once the government and the ministers have made decisions about when they'd like to go and consult and the content of that consultation. But certainly, we want to pass those messages back. As Peter said, we do welcome the commitment to having local leaders on the board of any such vehicle, and really will be looking to leverage their advice and the way in which they can help ensure that we have a very transparent and clear approach to the governance, so that people can feel that it's not opaque and that it is focused on that long-term delivery plan and leveraging the balance sheet required to have an infrastructure-first approach to delivery, and also making sure that its priorities include sustainable and inclusive growth.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Councillor Gardner-Smith, and then if it's all right, I'll do Councillor Bick and Councillor Bennett, and then Councillor Pounds after that, if that's okay, just as I can see people have been waiting a while.
Thanks very much. So Peter, you mentioned that this is the scale of what a potential DevCo will be, the largest potentially since the Milton Keynes development. Does that lead you to believe that a future development corporation needs certain powers? So are there specific powers that you think at that scale a DevCo absolutely needs, and others that you think are potentially you're more agnostic on?
When we go out to consultation, one of the things we will have to consult on is the extent of the powers. And whatever powers you take, you can also delegate back or take technically, but then say that they won't be put into effect until some later date. So we are currently considering, and it's ultimately a departmental decision, what the powers are when they become effective. I think that if you wanted the Development Corporation to be effective, ultimately it has to be able to make some decisions that are sometimes tough decisions. And talking to councillors who've been on the Old Oak Common Development Corporation and the London Legacy Development Corporation, I think the London Legacy had 4 different London councils on it and Old Oak 3. Ultimately, the Development Corporation, the voting majority on the planning committee was not elected councillors. But the feedback I have got is that in effect elected councillors felt that the right outcomes happened in the end, and they were free to oppose them if that was politically helpful to them, but something that was good still went through. So I'd hate to feel that we were ever trying to impose something that wasn't actually deep down welcomed by a significant part of the council. But I think the nature of the beast is to have the powers in the end if you needed to.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move to Councillor Bick online and then Councillor Bennett, and then I'll come back to the room for another round of Councillor Pounds. And in fact, I've got a couple to ask at the end as well. Councillor Bick, are you able to speak?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Sorry, I couldn't be present. I hope that you'll agree that leaders of the councils in this area, although not pushovers, have a long track record of realism and constructiveness and high standards in relation to growth under different political parties. That makes us, I think many of us feel, ideal partners for any project like yours. And you should absolutely want to bottle that, that sense of local ownership as you go forward. And that's going to require a certain sense of equality between us. And I am wondering if you're willing to consider if 50% of the membership of all the policy-making levels of the Development Corporation being drawn from local elected representatives. That's more than I think you referred to in your slides. And to do that on a politically proportionate basis to ensure the sort of continuity that you emphasised and the durability for the long term and therefore consistency. And from our point of view, maximum accountability to local people so that they're not feeling done to, but done with. And their elected representatives are going to need to be, collectively speaking, the instruments of that.
Thank you, Councillor Bick. Peter, are you happy to take that?
I think that's a very fair question. We are in a significantly evolving landscape because at the moment there's 4 local authorities and there will be 2 in a couple of years or whatever. And in my view, the fact that you go from 4 to 2 doesn't mean you go from 4 members of the board to 2. Each of them gets 2 or whatever, which then may also raise questions of not necessarily all from one party. But I think that's sort of emerging and not something we can kind of commit to or comment on today.
Thank you very much. And I think next we had Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. And could I apologise for joining you late? But first weekend in December is always in-law Christmas for me. So I've come straight off the train from Liverpool. And I just wanted to ask, this is a question perhaps mostly for Peter and Beth. And how pleased I was to hear Beth using my favourite phrase, which is, what does good look like? Because that's the question I want to ask you. What would be your success criteria for the Cambridge Growth Company? Have you set your criteria? And if not, can we have an input into them? And finally, how will you measure it? Thank you.
Yes, so I think we absolutely need to have really good evaluation criteria because we all need to understand how we can measure the impact of anything that we do. So just as a sort of principle, we're probably not there yet in terms of developing a full set of criteria. It's certainly something that we are looking at. In fact, Jim has been tasked with having a look at this in particular as well. So we would welcome conversations to look at how we can record that and start to work on that in a way that makes sense and aligns with what you want to see locally as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Pounds, thank you for waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to express a wish that when you have your local engagement, your deliberations, that you take consideration of the history and the heritage of Cambridge. It's incredibly rich and it's incredibly important to the residents. It underpins our civic life and it underpins our relationship with the university. And I think in terms of being successful with local communities and in your planning, it's something that really does need to be considered and thought about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. This is such a massively bigger project, I think, than all existing development corporations in the UK, which generally have tended to consider a small area, which is maybe one plot of land. This is really covering Cambridge and perhaps Greater Cambridge, and is massively more complicated. I mean, I just wonder whether how you are maybe applying learnings from the previous development corporations that have existed, and how you think this one is going to be particularly difficult, and how you will be working with all the very complicated number of other partners in this, water, etc. So, yeah. How are you going to cope with the complexity of all of this?
I agree it's massively complicated. To some extent, you break it down into pieces, and to some extent, you have to join it together with kind of water and transport and power and a kind of ring of public open space and nature corridors. You're joining it together. But overall, I think our responsibility is to help steward and promote half a dozen, 10 major schemes, and in each of those cases, they are more likely to be successful, what good looks like, I believe, if a development corporation has helped assemble the land and set a master plan. You know, too many things are piecemeal because not enough comes into a single ownership and a single management. Each single developer, each single landowner is trying to maximise the value of their bit rather than thinking of the whole. And so I think leaving aside the bits that join it together in terms of utilities, transport and nature, you break it down into not easy bits, but digestible bits.
Thank you very much. I'm just checking with members. Does anyone else have any other questions they wish to ask under this section? I appreciate lots may overlap, so please do ask them later. Councillor Dale, our last speaker, and then I will just add something at the end.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess picking up on that point, really, I'm not quite sure I fully understand why a DevCo, what it brings that other alternatives wouldn't bring. So, I think you mentioned about securing national government funding over the long term, but that is something that could be provided to local, the next phase of local government in a unitary. Is it something, I know there are certain powers around land value capture that may be something you might be able to harness, but what are the specific points that you can bring that, effectively, a well-coordinated local government structure can't?
I think probably principally an obsessive focus because of not being distracted by social services for old people or young people or rubbish collection or the thousands of smaller planning applications or potholes or whatever. And although what we will be doing is very complicated, it's the only thing we have to do. We don't have to get caught up in the thousands and thousands and thousands of complicated tasks that are the statutory duties of every local authority every day of the week. And I think that because of that focus and that purpose, we can probably plan longer term budgets than it's easier for local authorities to.
Thank you very much. Practicing what I preach, you've covered every single question on my list, so I'm not going to ask anything now. So thank you to members, great minds think alike. I'm just going to run through quickly what I think we've all talked about, just so we're all clear. Pardon? Clear. So we talked about Hartree and obviously our concerns about that site currently not coming forward. We talked about the area that is covered, whether it's a huge area, whether it's specific sites. Talked about green master planning and trees. We stressed the need for engagement with residents and the need to complement the local plan rather than go against it. Talked about the democratic deficit. So again, working alongside the councils, the new council in future, not afterwards or separately. We talked about the high standards we already have with growth with our planning committee, and we mentioned citizens' assemblies as a way of potentially looking at that democratic deficit. We mentioned, again, democratic deficit, more elected members, whether there's a 50-50 split is possible, which I think would reassure residents to a certain extent. We talked about avoiding any of the traps where previous money's been given. I think Councillor Clough mentioned the GCP and how transparency is important. And also looking at what powers you would want to take and whether you would then keep them or delegate them back. We talked about the importance of heritage and history, what the success criteria would look like. And obviously this is a massive DevCo proposed compared to pretty much anything we've seen in the UK in the near, certainly in an already existing urban and suburban area and rural. And also what the DevCo could bring that the City Council and the District Council can't currently provide, which I'm guessing is around those kind of big infrastructure projects. So I think if everyone's happy with that summary, thank you very much. We will move on to the second area, which is transport routes, corridors, and that may particularly relate to mayoral powers and the impacts on development. So does any member have a question they wish to ask? I can see Councillor Gawthrope Wood is going to go first.
Well, it's the question I was really starting to speak about in the last section, which is how can you align the infrastructure on transport with our local plan and what the aims there really are, and also if there is, you know, given that the mayoralty has powers over strategic transport powers, and how you think you can deliver better than he would perhaps, and given that there may be a difference in what he would like to do and what you might want to do, or in the emerging plan that we would like to do.
Thank you. Oh, Beth, thank you very much.
Yeah, so we've been part of the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy Working Group with Lynn and others for quite some time, and we've been looking at what is required to support the emerging local plan. But obviously, as we've said, we are looking to answer a different exam question than the emerging local plan. We've been tasked with exploring maximising the future potential from an economic, but also in the context of sustainable and inclusive growth. And that means that we're taking that longer term time horizon, and the growth ambition is higher. That brings with it some benefit in that you can actually have a critical mass that can enable you to explore longer term, more significant options, which we are doing, and hence the work with DFT to get support around the mass rapid transit work. And what we've been doing in combination with the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy Group is to say, well, let's ensure that your sort of shorter term focus dovetails in to that longer term, and the two fit together. So sharing modelling assumptions and ideas at a sort of concept level to test some of those proposals. So I think that's number one, is again to have the approach where we're building upon, but also to be really ambitious in our transport, in the opportunities to explore what transport could be delivered. We are still sort of quite early days in the overall transport work to underpin the evidence base that we're doing at the moment, but over the coming months that will start to help us to have greater level of certainty of the type and nature of those interventions, which will enable us to have more detailed conversations with the Mayor and his team as well. At present, I think there's quite a consensus around a need to support transport corridors where they are required. There is a question about the form of the technology that is used on those corridors, and that will inevitably change over time. So it may well be that there is a solution for a period of time, and then we can look at what it takes to transition that into a different form of solution. That is part of the work that we're undertaking at the moment, and I think that's really the starting point, is to understand and make sure that we have got that consensus around the corridors and where the growth needs are, and where the sort of real pinch points are at the moment, and also where they may be in terms of transport capacity.
Thank you. Oh, did you want to just come back as quick if possible?
Yeah, just to follow up, and it's about deliverability and how residents see this. I appreciate what you're saying about being ambitious and having a longer time scale, but the problems we have are now.
So I think this has come up quite recently. I was talking to Peter there because he was at a meeting where this was very much, a lot of the occupiers at CBC were talking about the impact of the delay of the train station and what can be done to help to provide support in the shorter term. So that is something that I don't think we've got the answer today to sort of share, but certainly we're taking that away, and we're looking at what can be done both sort of shorter term and are there any opportunities where we can address some of the really key pinch points, and particularly with obviously the delay to the station opening as an example at CBC. So we're happy to sort of talk about, you know, if people want to contact us and there are other issues that they want us to look at, then, you know, we'd like to have those conversations and see how we can, if we can support.
Thank you so much. I have Councillor Clough next, and then Councillor Dale.
Just picking up on your comment about transport corridors, and clearly there's already a tension on the table between the focus on busways running from Camborne and from the CSET project, and the Mayor struggling to work out whether it's actually going to be of any value to put any buses down those concrete corridors. So especially if it might be better to have light rail. So this is an urgent problem which is going to have to be solved very quickly, because, you know, we've just got the inspectors about reporting, I guess not too long in the new year, about the C2C scheme. So this is a problem upon us now. I'd be interested to know how you feel that can be resolved. Thank you.
So I think what we've been clear about is that we're supportive of the growth that is already planned and underway, because actually if we don't allow these schemes to go forwards, the delay to both local planned growth and national ambition for growth will be quite significant. So I think we need to work through the appropriate timing for when things can transition from, for example, busways into light rail, and the evidence that will lead us to a clear understanding of the time it would take to implement some of those other technology solutions. And that's something that we are looking at and working through at the moment. But certainly Peter attended the inquiry around C2C and was very clear in the ambition for us to see the growth corridors come forward and not to see any delay to them. Obviously, there are some sites as well that have already got Grampian conditions on them in relation to those schemes. So we are keen to see growth coming forward and not to see any further delay and stalling of growth that is associated with projects along those corridors.
I mean, in terms of working with the grain of your councils. I gave evidence at the Camborne to Cambridge inquiry in a completely different direction to the evidence the Mayor gave, and I wasn't giving evidence as a highway expert, because I'm not, but I was giving evidence that this government supports your council's work on those corridors, and that moving away from those corridors and sort of throwing in the towel at the Transport and Works Act would not throw up another solution tomorrow, it would throw up another solution in 10 years' time. So, you know, where we see that you have gone a long way down the road and believe in something politically and with your officers, we are there to support it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, that's reassuring to hear. We need affordable transport routes to affordable homes. Where there is a tension potentially with the Combined Authority and the Mayor, and if the Mayor is failing to respond to evidence on actual need to support growth in the area, will your team look at the actual potential to strip away those transport powers from the Mayor's office? I understand it would be something that you potentially can do.
I mean, I think that would be a very difficult question to answer at this point in time when we haven't even tried collaboration. You know, I think we're really keen to work collaboratively with the Mayor, and the Mayor and his team have been working collaboratively with us at this point in time. So I would favour that approach before any steps are taken to take a
Thank you very much. Do any more members of committee want? No? Okay. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question. A lot of the new transport corridors seem to be to the south and to the west. And in my previous incarnation, when I've had a recruitment role, most local businesses say it's much easier to recruit from the north and the east. So what information do you have access to about the Cambridge commuter sphere? And are you comfortable that the transport corridors, as we're calling them tonight, are actually going in the right directions?
So we have got consultants who are answering exactly those questions at the moment, and that is the work that's underway as part of the evidence base to have a look at what are those growth patterns. We've got a lot of data on travel to work patterns as well. I know there are other corridors being developed other than the south and the west, so there's obviously the Waterbeach corridor as well, but all of that is being assessed at the moment, and as I said, we're on the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy Working Group as well to ensure that we're taking all of those views and learning from the evidence that's being compiled for that as well.
Thank you very much. I mean, certainly to add my halfpenny worth, because I do have a question on this one that hasn't been asked. You know, I'm already concerned with the existing emerging local plan. We are very reliant on those transport networks, and if they don't come forward, you know, so I think that is an area for me where I think CGC really could add some value, because we really have a commitment, I hope, shared by everyone to affordable, sustainable transport links. And I think, as Peter and Beth mentioned in the presentation, that idea of people being near enough to work or able to get there quickly without having to rely on a car. So certainly from my point of view, that's a real important piece that you could add to the jigsaw. And does anyone else have... well, Councillor Smith, Councillor Smith is one of the Cabinet members, so I will just take questions from committee first, if that's okay. Councillor Pounds.
It's just a tiny point. I'm concerned, 2.2, people from Waterbeach have been in touch with me, actually, because they don't want their station moved. The people who live in Waterbeach Village are very annoyed that it's going to be moved to what's probably a 30-minute walk from where the location of the station is at the minute. So I know it's like a specific point, but it's just something to say that perhaps in your consultation and that, you're very concerned about taking communities with you, but this is one instant which is not taking the existing community with you, and it's actually causing quite a lot of upset.
I'm not sure whether that might be one for Stephen Moore, but just because I think that comes through in our... but Stephen, would you like to lead on?
Well, just to comment on, obviously the relocation of Waterbeach Station was a 2018 local plan policy requirement, and we recognise that the existing residents of Waterbeach are less happy about the additional walk or the distance that it'll be from the centre of Waterbeach, but a population of 27,000 people going to the existing station, which doesn't have particularly strong access and is not in the centre of the new cluster that will be Waterbeach and Waterbeach Village, is also likely to cause very significant impacts on the existing village. And so designing a solution that allows appropriate access, that's why it was a policy requirement that it relocate, so that the catchment and the walk-to distance from Waterbeach new railway station for all of the residents of existing village and the future new town was optimised. So we recognise the concern, but perhaps lessons of towns where the stations have grown massively to take account of growing populations points to kind of trying to optimise that location, and that's what we've done.
Thank you very much. I feel that was slightly before your time in the sense it was 2018 aspiration. Does anyone else from committee? Otherwise, I will ask the Cabinet member, Councillor Simon Smith. I think you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll speak as the, if I can, the chair of the GCP's Joint Assembly Scrutiny Committee.
Councillor Smith, could you just remind us who you are, what your portfolio is, and again, what roles you hold? That would be very useful.
I'm Simon Smith, and my portfolio is finance and resources. But I'm also chair of the Joint Assembly for the GCP, which is a joint committee between City, County and South Cams. And I depart from Councillor Scuff's views on the GCP because it is delivering a remarkable programme of sustainable transport routes. But because the funding was granted on the City deal a few years ago, I didn't anticipate the exceptionally high levels of inflation that have arisen since then. And so as the programme is coming through to the delivery stage, it has worked through the very complex consultation and review processes. It's really going to be relying on funding from Section 106 obligations into the early 30s. But these are going to be delayed even further following the Hartree decision, because now Anglian Water are imposing objections on new development. We think until the Anglian Water deliver new wastewater treatment capacity at the existing site. So a minimum of a 3-year delay now because of the Hartree decision, and this is now led to a crisis in confidence amongst major developers across the city, and they would seem to be appearing to be withdrawing from bringing forward new development proposals. So a scheme that was supposed to accelerate growth has had the reverse effect and is actually going to stall growth for some time until that's resolved, and there's the knock-on impact on the GCP programme that's going to need refuelling with capital to deliver its programme, which, as you've mentioned, one of those elements is a subject of a Grampian condition for the new to release the new housing in Bourne and possibly Cambourne as well. So I'd quite like to hear your response to that situation, because it seems to be right up your strata, unlocking and accelerating development and repairing the damage that's been done by the Hartree decision, which is very, very hard to take, particularly given in that number there was £150 million in contingencies, and Anglian Water did not contribute a penny, but would have profited handsomely from it, from the release of their land. And also
Councillor Smith, if you could just be as brief as possible, we'd be really grateful, because we've got quite a lot to get through. Thank you. Just to be clear, only I'm watching, a Grampian condition is a condition we impose on planning applications where we allow them to build out, but they can't occupy the building until the water, or foul water in this case, is resolved. It's I believe it was originally Grampian Council who did it, that's why it's called that. But just in case anyone watching doesn't know what that is, it's sort of a way to allow some development, but it will not be able to be occupied until we've resolved those issues. Thank you. I don't know if Beth Peter or any of your team want to reply to any of that.
I think the point about the delays to Section 106 was exactly why we intervened at Waterbeach, and that was why we worked with Homes England to look at a solution that enabled support to go in because of the cash flow constraints around some of the developer contributions that were coming in. So if there are further constraints around that, I think we'd welcome a conversation to look at that in a bit more detail. In terms of the Anglian Water position, the fact that this has now been escalated up to a cross Whitehall ministerial level group is down to the importance that we put on this, and also ministers are putting on this, and they are scrutinising Anglian Water and their decision making as part of that process, and asking them to come up with solutions and to work with government to do that. So I appreciate we don't have those answers as yet because that work is still ongoing, but just a sort of some reassurance that this is now being dealt with at the sort of highest level to try to ensure that a solution can come forwards.
Thank you very much. I don't think there's any further questions. Just to remind ward councillors, I will try and fit in questions from ward councillors at the end. I hope many of your questions may well be addressed by members, but if not, I will give an opportunity at the end. I'm proposing just to move to a break in a minute, if that's all right. I will just quickly run through what we've talked about. So we've talked about the local plan and transport infrastructure and how you might deal with the difference of opinion between the CPCA, the mayor and other parts of the community, the councils. We talked about busways and light rail and how we'll look at how you can future-proof those and how those are essential to coming forward to even our local plan, never mind any growth over and above that. We stressed, I think, the committee's concern for affordable transport and affordable homes on sustainable routes. And I think the need to respond to the evidence, whether that's the CPCA or yourselves, and indeed the councils and local plans, and to work together rather than against each other. Councillor Bennett asked to make sure your evidence considers all the different commuting routes and not just those where we've already got planned busways or transport links. And we talked about whether there's anything we can learn from Waterbeach Station. I think Councillor Pounds mentioned that. And Councillor Clough mentioned GCP, but Councillor Smith also talked about how GCP had provided some positive transport routes, but that obviously, again, it's that issue about how CGC can help with the constraints around things like water and transport. So I hope that's a fair summary. And if no one else has any more questions, I suggest, where are we at to time? I shall look at a clock that works. If we come back at 7:20, please.
Just after 7.
Yeah. So we'll come back in 17 minutes, if that's okay. Well, if you would like to come back a little earlier, please do, but I'm mindful that a lot of people have come from work and may need to grab something to eat. So we'll come back at 7:20. Sarah, could you just take the live stream off, please? live. Thank you very much. Welcome back everyone to this evening's Performance Asset and Strategy Scrutiny Committee with the Cambridge Growth Company on Tuesday the 9th of December. So we're moving on now to the third area we highlighted, which is around the planning issues. So that might relate to the local plan, hierarchy of development and devolved planning powers. I know we have touched on that. So again, I'd urge members not to repeat things we've already said. So I don't know if anyone from the scrutiny committees would like to ask any questions, please. Councillor Gawthrope-Wood and Councillor Clough.
Okay, so we've got the draft local plan in play, going out for consultation rather, but it's drafted. What I'm wondering is how much crossover there is between the research that you are doing, your evidence base, with what's in, say, the annual monitoring report and already in the local plan, because I wouldn't like to see duplication, I'd like to see cross-reference. And then the other question, yeah, maybe, I don't know whether it comes under this topic or the next one, but when you get to the development side, I mean, what we really want to make sure is that the high quality standards in the local plan are adhered to. And I'm sure that private developers will want to push back on that and say that, you know, when they do their viability assessments. So it's how will you make sure that the standards are adhered to? Thanks.
Thank you. Peter, you have a chance to that.
Can I make a couple of comments? And then if he's with us still, Anthony, who is a planner, who, as I said earlier, came from the London Legacy Development Corporation, can answer in more detail. I mean, I think we hopefully are in a better position than average to actually make developers do the right thing, because I envisage that a significant portion of land will either pass through our hands or be financed by us. And it's sort of easier to make the developer do the right thing if they have been recruited and appointed on the basis that they are going to do it, rather than they have bought the site, fought it through planning, bought the site by paying too much and are always trying to claw it back. When I was in Copenhagen recently, it's a city that has really, really turned itself around over 30 years. One of the first things they did as a council was start acquiring the land, in effect giving themselves a planning brief and saying to developers, the price we want for this is X. Don't bid more to win it by bidding more. Give us your best possible scheme and we will choose the scheme. I don't know whether the government will let us get away with that, but I think we should try it, because ultimately, you know, the private sector does have skills. There are tons of wonderful architects out there, but the scheme has to be driven by the fact that you win it by delivering something good rather than you win it by paying too much. On that note, I'll pass to Anthony.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Peter. I think Peter's absolutely right. Sort of policy and process. Peter's touched on the process. There's plenty of other things as well that that I know Stephen has put in place in terms of, you know, design review panels and the like. So, you know, we certainly, as a growth company, wouldn't be advocating anything less. And obviously, the policy position is clear from the local plan, and our position is very much to be positive and supportive of the plan. In terms of the evidence base and the comments from the councillor on that, Stephen's been very good about sharing the draft evidence base, partly to inform our work, but also so that we can review that and identify any areas that we think we can help Stephen and the team with as well. So just to reassure the councillor on the evidence base, there has been a good deal of shared work on that, and that will continue.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clough?
Apologies for a very brief and slightly parochial question. In our ward, we have a neighbourhood plan, and I'm assuming that nothing that the growth company will be setting out to do will cross-cut or put what local residents have worked on and agreed over a number of years and voted on, and therefore is effectively their will for their local area. Thank you.
Actually, before you answer that, I actually have a few questions, one of which overlaps quite nicely with, if that's helpful to, as I am, well, I'm not chairing this, I'm the planning and transport lead for our group, and along with Councillor Thornborough spend an inordinate amount of time on various of our planning committees, including the joint development one that looks at the fringe sites. So if that's okay, as I haven't seen any of the hands up. So I wanted to ask, yet to a certain extent, you talk about you can take planning powers. I think from what you said, you're not envisaging taking the entire Greater Cambridge as planning powers, so you're going to be consenting dormer windows and first floor extensions. So I wonder if you could offer some reassurance about it. I mean, I think I've been quite clear about this. I feel we have a really high performing planning authority, and I would much prefer the Cambridge Growth Companies probably to work in the areas where you can help us, water and infrastructure and things like that, and hopefully allow as much planning power as possible to remain with the local planning authority, award-winning as it is. Although I do understand your point about needing to accelerate big sites, but I think, as you can see from the new emerging local plan, we are committed to doing that. And in fact, with infrastructure blocks removed, we can accelerate the local plan further without any extra houses, just bringing forward the time period for those. I think we've already touched on you would commit to the local plan. I'd be quite interested about the hierarchy of sites. So, we've talked very clearly about sort of urban, suburban, large settlements, and not rural. I think I'm right in saying you've said that is broadly aligned with your strategy, but would welcome confirmation. And I suppose with any sites you are looking at, are you envisaging these coming forward before Regulation 19 of our own local plan? Are you building on what we're doing, or is this going to be a completely separate process? Which I think picks up on Councillor Clough's point about, obviously, how it sits with our local plan and the existing hierarchy of the plan, National Planning Policy Framework, and underneath that, the neighbourhood plans and supplementary planning documents. Thank you.
Shall I say a few bits and then either Beth or Anthony add? I said earlier on that it's our job to, in a sense, preserve villages from having to take extra houses. So, as far as I'm concerned, for the vast majority, 95 out of 100 villages, we should be a neutral to positive impact. And if you have a local neighbourhood plan that you treasure, we have no desire to kind of ramp it up or stop it. I lost the train of my thought. In terms of the taking or delegating back of powers, I would only envisage decision-making of a committee of a development corporation on the largest, most strategic schemes. And on those, were Stephen to be willing, or his successor to be willing as the years go by, because we'll both be retired before this is over, I would envisage that the development corporation stays fairly lean, and while it will have a few at the least planning officers, it may well, in effect, commission the local authority to do the bulk of the work in preparing a report on a planning application. Beth or Anthony?
Anthony, do you wish to add anything?
I can, yes. That's okay, Beth? I don't know. All I would say is, recognise that there's genuine excellence in terms of the shared planning service. And I think, Chair, as you said, we would only want to add value to that. Certainly don't want to duplicate that. Certainly don't want, I think, although nothing's been decided, but certainly my view would be we certainly wouldn't be getting involved in the smaller stuff as you described. So, and in terms of, the important smaller stuff like a neighbourhood plan, we certainly wouldn't be looking to get into that at all. The work around, whatever happens with planning powers, there's a great tradition of joint planning work in Greater Cambridge, and you know, it would be foolish of us as a growth company and if that becomes a development corporation to not recognise that and not work with the grain of that. That's probably what I would add.
Thank you. Okay, Beth, you're okay. Thank you very much. And in terms of the hierarchy of development, I think I'm guessing
I think,
yeah, and add.
Yeah, Chair, I think, as I said before, we're supportive of the local plan hierarchy. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Any other members? Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Thank you. So Councillor Gawthrope-Wood sort of touched on this about the high environmental standards within the emerging local plan. I just wanted to drill down on that particularly. We've obviously, you know, some of these are really high, you know, best practice standards and really innovating, you know, so, and I wonder whether you can envisage any situation where you would feel it was necessary to deviate from those high standards that we support.
So we have been working with the Advisory Council, and one of the first things that we looked at was environmental principles. And actually we've got Nathan with us today, who I'll turn to in a minute, to talk through some of the principles that we've adopted, working particularly with Councillor Bridget Smith around some of the transition from the work that was done in the Oxcam Regional Partnership into the principles that are now being adhered to and used in the local plan. But Nathan, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. The direct answer is not while I'm here. So those set of environment principles that were developed as part of the Oxcam Pan Regional Partnership, where I worked to Councillor Bridget Smith in revising the Oxcam principles from 2020, I think it was, to revise and up-issue those. I think certainly the previous versions did have a reference form part of the evidence base for the local plan from 2018. So I think going forward in revising those, we kind of have 5 themes that the Advisory Council are keen for us to look forward on, and we've been engaging with MHCLG on how we deliver those as well. One of those is around net zero, acknowledging that we need to move at scale and at speed, rather than set a target. One was around nature and land, so this is about landscape scale nature recovery, and I think there's a huge amount of opportunity across Greater Cambridgeshire, building on the work, the great work that's already out in the public domain already. Obviously water is a challenge in all its forms, water quality, water supply and wastewater. The fourth one is around circular economy as well, so that's proximity principle, how we can look to support kind of yourselves and GCSP in terms of the circular economy, embedded carbon, those kind of things. And then finally, the climate adaptation, climate resilience, and some of those much bigger issues that are the gnarly issues that are quite difficult to track down, but certainly acknowledging the climate emergency and climate breakdown, there are things that we need to do now and then build that in terms of creating great spaces. And certainly from my perspective and from CGC's perspective, certainly want to build on, add value and provide additionality using the position that we have in our proximity to government to be able to make that happen.
Thank you very much. That's a very reassuring answer, actually. I think that's positive. And Councillor Davey.
Sorry to bounce back to planning powers again, if I can. And I do appreciate that balance between getting it right about what should be and shouldn't be within the remit. But it might be helpful if you're able to give an example of where you might want to remove planning powers from the existing bodies. Would it be about master planning, for example, on larger sites? Or just so we get a feel for it, if that's possible at this stage.
So development corporations sort of come with a set of base powers, if you like, and then some discretionary powers. And the base powers are around being able to secure funding, to be able to undertake land assembly, CPO, and that sort of activity. There's then choices to be made around the development management powers in relation to being able to determine applications for sites, and also plan making powers in terms of the the sort of approach to statutory plan making. And the consultation that the government are intending to go through will set out options, and there are decisions being reviewed at the moment in terms of what might be those options and what might be performed or part of that consultation. I think we've already said today that the development management powers very much would be around those large-scale significant where you do need to take that view and you want to have the sort of broader master planning approach and to be ensuring that those sites are coming forward and contributing as well towards the infrastructure and the developer contributions that be coming through those sites. I think as you go into the plan making powers, it's more around a choice around the ability to deliver the whole and to be able to utilise the powers of a development corporation to have a balance sheet that can actually effectively deliver against the scale of infrastructure required, but then being able to ensure that you've got the sites coming through that are contributing back into that infrastructure so that your balance sheet is operational and viable and enabling delivery of this activity. And that's really the sort of set of choices that are being looked at the moment to help guide where it might be in terms of the powers that are used for the development corporation. But as we've said today, we're no intention to sort of do anything other than the larger scale for those significant growth areas. And then at present, we are building upon the emerging local plan, and there is a journey to go through for that plan making process that's already in train, and we're trying to support that as much as we can as well.
Councillor David, do you want to come back?
Yeah, sorry, that's very welcome, thank you. I think one of the things that it's been a gap, certainly Councillor Thornborough and Councillor Holloway have looked at previously, is about spatial planning in its broadest sense. So that's welcome, although I say we'll look forward to seeing with interest what the consultation brings about the actual specifics around the planning processes.
Thank you, Councillor David. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. And I omitted to say before that I'm really grateful to you all for coming. I think it's so important to all our residents, and it's great to have this discussion. So thank you again for giving up your evening. So my question follows on a little bit from what Beth was saying. The government has announced £400 million in support of various things, which in one sense is a rather a lot of money, but in another sense, it's not enough to do everything that that we want to do. And so my question is, I mean, do you have a sense of, from central government, that they understand the fact that there's going to be a need for a lot more money, and how willing they are to actually be funding all of this? And 400 million, will not cover everything. So I'd be interested in a view of what the feeling is in Whitehall about this.
5 years ago, I was an innocent who'd never been anywhere near Parliament. I'm slightly less innocent after 5 years. And to some extent, you have to sort of play a long game, and you have to get government more and more publicly committed to something so it goes higher up their agenda. There will be more money, but it's a slow process, and I think it's something where we need, as far as possible, and are building up sort of allies, not just in the Ministry of Housing and Communities and Local Government, but in the Treasury, in DFT, in trade, in overseas investment. I think it actually needs, perhaps as a percentage of the overall value of what we create, really quite a small amount, but that's still a lot more than 400 million. And I believe it's money that, in the end, the government will largely recover, either directly from some form of land value capture or indirectly from a bigger tax base. But I think the step at the moment is to get over the line and get them committed by saying there is a development corporation. The next step is to ask for more money.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dale, is that your hand? Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I wasn't sure whether to ask this now or in the next section, because it is around sort of affordable homes, but linking towards planning and the restrictions we have there. So from what I've reviewed, sort of centrally led organisations where they've taken planning powers have a history of then delivering below target when it comes to affordable homes. I think you've mentioned the London Legacy Development Corporation, and that was one which had like a massive target, about 50%, and that got reduced and reduced. I guess, can you give us any assurance if you were to take planning powers for, say, the airport, which is a site that you've noted as a great strategic opportunity, that you will continue to deliver at the 40% targets that we aim for?
I think it's absolutely critical to meet the targets because it's meeting the need and it's making it a complete and balanced and fair city. And if you don't make it a complete and balanced and fair city, in the end, the economic growth the government wants won't happen. I can't speak for LLDC, and Anthony can if he wants to. 50% is high. London building costs have gone through the roof. If it was baked into Section 106, there began to be no grant. So there has been a kind of increasing perfect storm for London delivery. But it shouldn't apply here. There aren't the high-rise buildings with the high costs. There's less contaminated land, and so on. Anthony, do you want to say anything about LLDC?
Yes, but I'm conscious of time. I think there's two very different scenarios for LLDC. One was, and who knows, there was a change of mayor midstream, Mayor of London, with different policies around affordable housing, and actually responding to the Mayor Sadiq Khan's challenge of 50% affordable housing was something that the corporation did on its own land and had to do to meet policy and continues to do that off LLDC owned land in some of the areas around the Olympic Park. The policy requirement was 35%, and that was trending around 30% at the end of planning powers due to some of the factors that Peter was talking about, but also due to the balance between affordable housing and infrastructure investment. Things like East Bank and the cultural buildings there obviously come with a cost, and upgrading transport infrastructure. So as with all planning decisions, it's in the balance. Those were all made in public, and but yes, in terms of the sites owned by LLDC, there's a 50% requirement baked into through Section 106 agreements, and those will continue to be delivered, albeit more slowly than anyone would really like.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions, or do any of the officers or cabinet members want to speak on that? I'm just aware we talked about Stephen's planning powers, but I think that's very reassuring to hear some of those answers. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Nope. Okay, if that's all right, we'll move on. I'm just going to do a quick summary of what we've talked about again. So we talked about using existing evidence from the local plan and other reports we have. We talked about how we're keen for it to obviously adhere to the local plan, or it obviously exceed them, and that developer standards are maintained. We talked about how we want to work jointly with CGC, where we can, where the planning authority is performing well and is consenting those areas of growth. You talked about how it's probably likely the larger sites would be the ones affected by planning powers rather than doing every single extension in Greater Cambridge, which would be a challenge even with 50 staff, I would think. We talked about spatial planning and how that is obviously somewhere where, CGC could potentially add value, I think. Councillor Davies nodding at me. And we talked about how obviously the money, we're going to need more money, or you're going to need more money because to achieve some of the aspirations, and the importance of affordable homes. And I think I would add to that infrastructure, which I know we're going to pick up in the next one. You know, that's so critical for us as councillors, but also for residents, I think. And that's where a lot of trust is built up. So if everyone's happy with that summary, we will move on to the next one, which is infrastructure, community building, including affordable social homes, although I do know we have just touched on that, and also around arts, culture, open spaces and biodiversity, because obviously that's a really important key part of any development. Do members have any questions? Councillor Shield, Councillor Day, Councillor Young, and then I'll come to Councillor Bennett after that.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Can you tell us where sports fields and play parks will be in the mix, including areas for skateboarding? We're really pleased with what has been achieved at the Meadows with its multi-purpose area for different sports, but it is a topic that keeps coming back in public consultations on proposed developments. And also, apologies that my earlier thing about trees was in the wrong bit. Should have been in this bit.
Thank you, Councillor Shield. I don't know who would like to come back on that one.
It's certainly a factor for us to think about going forward. I don't think we're quite in that space yet to get into that amount of detail, but we'd certainly back up and support what's in the emerging local plan coming forward. But obviously, local open space provision, spaces for play are critically important for good neighbourhoods. So we back that position.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davey, I think you're next.
I think I probably should declare an interest on the back of Patrick's statement. I'm a director at Cambridge United Football Club, so I have to say that. And of course, I'm delighted to be here rather than there this evening. The question is linked, not so much about sports, but if we're trying to attract, in all seriousness, people from, I don't know, who come here rather than go to Basel or Boston and other high-tech areas in the world, what are we going to do? If you could expand a bit on what we're going to do about arts and culture as part of the Development Corporation, because clearly it's not just about building houses. I know Peter doesn't think that, but it would be nice to hear more about what your thoughts are around how you can bring arts and culture development within the city that looks like it'll have a population of 500,000 within 15 years' time.
And I think, going back to your earlier question about engagement, that's where the linkage, because we need to ask that question locally, and we need to understand as part of the growth plans what people do want to see as part of that. It's communities for people who live here already, but also, as you say, to attract new people into the area and demonstrate that you've got a quality of life that enables you to bring up your families here and to have those cultural experiences as much as your employment experiences. So I think that will need to form part of our engagement so that we can really understand and build on the work that is already happening in the space. So we have been talking with CPCA and some of their work they've been doing. We were sort of trying to understand if there was a bit of a cultural map, if you like, of actually what's the baseline, where are we at the moment, and how do we start to take those things forward. So we've been liaising with Jules Lent at the CPCA to understand the position and build upon it, really, so that we can. But I think we need to hear more voices in that space as to what the future looks like for the area.
Thank you very much.
And it should include a new football club as well as a cultural centre for opera.
Yes, I was just going to say, Mr. Carver's public question obviously earlier did touch on some of the issues I think residents have raised around some of the things like concert halls that are quite hard to provide piecemeal. I apologise. I think Councillor Young was left, yes. Then Councillor Gardner-Smith put a hand up, Councillor Clough, and then I'll take Councillor Bennett after members, if that's okay. Oh, and Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood. So please go ahead, Councillor Young.
I'm afraid Councillor Davey asked my question.
Thank you so much, appreciated. We'll move on to Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Sort of half been asked, so I'll be very brief. So first of all, the point about affordable houses in the previous section, I think that in the detail of that, what's really important in our emerging local plan is also what proportion is for social rent as well. So it's not just about the overall affordable envelope, but what that mix is, and social rent being really important within that to prioritise. And then on arts and culture, which I fully support the comments that have already been made, I think one of the things we often think about what we need in terms of grand concert halls, absolutely support that. But we also need to see the artists coming through in a community, which we know also drives growth in an area. And so, but what we really lack in Cambridge City in particular, studies have shown, is affordable artist space. So just to plug on that you know, that being part of the mix in terms of considering how a future development corporation thinks about driving culture. It's not just the culture that's already here that can be preserved, but the culture that's going to come through from future generations as well.
Fantastic. I think I'll take that as agreement from CGC. Yes, Councillor Dale, and anyone else from committee, just from the committee voting members, please put your hand up if you want a question. Otherwise, I'll go to Councillor Bennett afterwards.
Yeah, so just picking up again on the social housing, I think councillors across the chamber would agree that the Cambridge Investment Partnership has been a very, very successful vehicle, and it's an asset that we should seek to protect in the future. I guess I just wanted to both say that, but also just ask it, you know, are you in discussions around how that model that is delivering high quality social housing will work with your structure going forward?
It's worth saying that Beth and I both come out of Homes England, and Homes England is the main source of money to housing associations, and affordable housing is therefore kind of a core thing to us, not a marginal thing. And I think the partnership you have with Hill has produced fantastic results.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gorforwood. Oh, sorry, Councillor.
So, right, we've covered KIP. Cambridge Leisure Park, we're looking to renovate, develop as a local and regional, probably, community arts area, cultural quarter. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think this is going to become more and more important. Obviously the university has its own little concert hall, but it's something I think you need to think about. And also when you're thinking about developing new towns like Campbell, it's more, I think, about community and the infrastructure, schools, things for teenagers to do, and of course that's something that exercises me as a ward councillor in one of the less well-off parts of Cambridge. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, again, we're nodding. Councillor Clough, apologies.
It's a very interesting discussion. I don't want to dip back into the previous area, but it seems as if this cultural focus is really about how are we trying to make sure that people are encouraged to stay within the city rather than going through their life cycle decisions where, you know, they want a larger house and then they go out in the countryside, then we get all the commuting issues that flow from that. It's if we can create a whole lifetime community system, then all of the problems that we're facing at the moment may well start to dissipate. Is that something that's within your thought process in your area designs and cultural offerings? Thank you.
I mean, I don't think at the moment we can point to specific places on a map for specific activities, but the underlying concept, absolutely.
Apologies if I wasn't too clear, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I think you're meaning, in effect, intergenerational communities. Yeah. Councillor Griffin, and then thank you, Councillor Bennett, you're being very patient.
Just a comment. Let's all remember that Cambridge is the home of two fine universities, and Anglia Ruskin and the University of Cambridge.
Yes, I should note I have worked for Anglia Ruskin until very recently, as is on the record, but yes, I do appreciate we have 2 universities here. I think that's everyone from the committee, so Councillor Bennett, thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say a word about community facilities and community buildings, because we've seen in recent years that a lot of these are casualties of development because they hang out in the cheap old buildings, which unfortunately do tend to get redeveloped. And is there anything the growth company can do to encourage developers to offer meantime space to some of these organisations and keep them going a bit longer? And just to illustrate this, one small ward has lost the Squared Circle Boxing Club, Cambridge Reuse, providing second-hand furniture has got a 9-month extension but is now struggling. And, you know, we also have lost the Red Cross Mobility Centre, which is now operating online only. And these are quite big losses that affect some very vulnerable residents. So I'd really love to see a meantime register come forward where developers could basically be matched with community groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I could just see Councillor Holloway had his hand up. I don't know if you want to jump in with anything before CGC come back on what we're already doing in that area. For I think around meanwhile uses is what Councillor Bennett's talking about.
Well, the issue of community facilities is one that I think all members of the committee have mentioned and shown that they care deeply about today. But in Abbey Ward, the development that we're already undertaking as a council, I think, shows the opportunities that come with new development. So where we've got 120 new council homes at East Barnwell, we've also got a new library, new community centre, new preschool, and we're going to have new shops as well. So actually, I imagine that in developments that CGC might be bringing forward, they would have opportunities to really have some fantastic new community facilities as well. Councillor Shield mentioned earlier the Meadows, where yes, we've provided housing, but actually really, really good community centre and open space, sports facilities there as well. So yes, there are organisations that are struggling to find space in the city, and there are changes happening very quickly in the city, and we do need to be mindful as the city changes quickly of trying to preserve and support some of these key organisations. But actually, I think there are some really good opportunities to do that as part of new development.
Thank you.
Completely agree, and we will.
Oh, thank you. And I welcome, I think the new emerging local plan has a meanwhile use policy in there, which I'm guessing might be what Councillor Thorpe was about to put her hand up and say. But so obviously, if residents are listening, if they're supportive of that, please do feedback through the consultation for that about any positive things. Do I see any other questions on this? Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood.
This is just a comment that, sorry, this is quite micro stuff, but the Cambridge Reuse are in Barron House, which is owned by the, along with a number of other charities, and CCVS are there as well. And that is a meanwhile use building, but at the moment, I think they're there for a fairly long time. So they haven't closed.
Thank you. I had one question, if I might, as it's one that hasn't been asked. I think residents and councillors find it really difficult when infrastructure is delayed, you know, and that's a really bad thing. If we're building a new community, however big or small, if the school doesn't come forward, if the GP surgery comes forward but there isn't a GP in it, and it creates bad feeling, or if the public pathways aren't opened. I mean, I suppose I'd ask, what can CGC add to help us, and obviously in the sites that you're particularly focusing on, make sure that doesn't happen? And it does pick up a bit, as Peter already said, about developers needing to come in with that understanding that that is a sort of a first step And we have stepping conditions here where we say you can't build out past X number of homes until this, but the problem is if they're not met through a condition, it's a very long process for the LPA to go and chase that up. So I'd be really grateful if you had any thoughts on what you could add.
So in my kind of roles, job appointment roles, as we really get going, I would have several people on education, several people on health, and several people on culture. And, you know, their job is not to actually design buildings or build buildings, but make sure that they are talking to the health authorities, the education authorities, the cultural community groups to make sure these things happen. And, you know, at the scale that government wants things to happen in Cambridge, I hope that we would be able to be more successful with the NHS in saying, we need doctors. Surgery has been built, we need doctors. I mean, I think quite often the surgery doesn't even get built, not necessarily through the developer's fault. Urban and Civic tell me that they have, I think, allowed a free plot and the money on 5 of their schemes, and there's never been take up from the clinical commissioning group. So we believe passionately if you don't provide those facilities, you won't get the community or the take-up.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands. So again, I'll do a quick summary. So we talked about the importance of sports and play parks and arts and culture coming first. We talked about affordable homes and particularly social rent being obviously a fairly obvious issue in Cambridge given the cost of living and the price of housing. Talked about looking at the Cambridge Investment Partnership, the KIP, between Hill and the Council joint venture, and the good practice that has hopefully already demonstrated. Talked about the leisure park, obviously particularly with the Cambridge Central Eastern Access now coming forward, potentially through East West Rail. Talked about community building, meanwhile uses, and intergenerational communities, so allowing families to stay in the same area, which obviously has benefits for childcare and supporting elderly communities. And we talked about how CGC could help with delays to infrastructure to sort of increase residents' confidence. So I think if everyone's happy, that is a fair summary. We will move on. I'm mindful of time, so we need to get through. We've got water scarcity and foul water infrastructure, including NEC, although, again, we have picked up on this quite a bit, so I'm very happy if people feel their question has been answered, you don't need to ask it again. Could I ask if there's any questions on this area? Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. This probably goes back a bit on the planning issues as well, but I think an important element to our local plan, the emerging one, is our commitment to respect the water scarcity and to put in place the what we need to do before we can deliver on the housing that's already quite ambitious. What worries me, I guess, is if you're centrally sort of led, you're going to have pressure coming from central government to keep going, but can you sort of guarantee that you will respect those constraints and not use the powers that you would have to instead override that local plan and build anyway?
Yeah, I think the steps that we've taken so far to work with all of the bodies involved when looking at particularly the objections that were on the 9,000 homes originally that have recently been unblocked, I think that demonstrates that we are looking for a solutions approach to this. We're not looking to come in and just sort of override. It's going to take time and it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of different organisations working together to get those solutions. I mentioned earlier we've got the water scarcity group, and now there is also the ministerial level task force, which is looking at both the situation that we have with Anglian Water, but also having greater oversight and scrutiny of the Grafham Transfer, the Fens Reservoir, to ensure that these programmes are going to deliver on time so that they can come forward. So I think there is a huge amount of respect for all of those constraints and the situation that we're in, and we are genuinely looking for the solutions that will help us all collectively to take that forwards.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from members before I... In that case, I will ask a couple, if that's okay. Yeah, she's put me on the list, keeping me in order. So I think there's a certain level of scepticism about these kind of retrofitting ideas. This idea the developer can say, well, I'm going to retrofit this school or these houses and that will buy me some credits, because it's not proven yet. It's quite ethereal, we're not sure. And I think I'd be keen to look for some reassurance that we don't give water credits that have to be proven later. It needs to have happened before we release the water. And obviously what you could do to help us, things like, at the moment we can't use drinking water to flush toilets in houses. We are using it extensively in our office and lab planning consents, but those kind of things that need a national change, and I think that's building regs, whether you could add value. And also with the North East Cambridge site, obviously at the moment, that has a lack of policy protection at the moment because Hartree, the wastewater treatment work isn't moving. I am concerned that we may end up with lots and lots of office buildings sitting in the odour zone, and then by the time it perhaps comes available for housing, we're running out of space for them. So I don't know if there's, again, if that's something on your to-do list to try and ensure that as and when that does come forward and the odour issue or the wastewater treatment works is resolved, that can be used for sustainable housing as well as the labs and offices, which can also go in there at the moment because they have less stringent odour controls. Thank you.
So I think looking at things like the potential for a water credit system and the water efficiency programme, these are all component parts of a bigger piece, and we need to look at all of those pieces that are coming together. So what are the opportunities from a sort of agricultural perspective? What are the nature-based solutions? What are sort of local reservoir approaches to enable a holistic approach? And I think that all of those sort of shorter term, smaller solutions will come together and have a level of impact, but obviously that's only going to take us so far, and we do need to still look to what are those solutions sort of post the sort of early 2040s when, you know, abstraction licenses come in and there is a real constraint on the water supply. So, and that programme of work is ongoing, and there's a lot of focus and resource being put at that. But I think for the immediate, I understand there's a sort of forecasting approach, and then, you know, we need to understand that actually this is going to deliver, and therefore there needs to be a series of opportunities that can be explored almost in a bit of an over-programming way, so that we do have that guarantee that this is actually going to deliver at the levels we need.
Stephen, yes, go ahead, please.
Well, just to build on that, actually through the Growth Company, obviously we've got an ongoing water retrofit programme through several £1 million that has been earmarked, in which we're progressively retrofitting council stock. I think there is people conflate water credits projects with a water retrofit programme, so just a note of caution about that. We are underway. I think we're going to start implementing the water retrofit programme on council-owned properties in South Cambs and the city, I think, next year. We spent a lot of time preparing with our contractors to be able to do that, and that's funded by, or the funding came through the Water Scarcity Group, which obviously Beth has talked about. Water credits is something that goes beyond that, and what this work that we're doing with the support of the Growth Company, but with DEFRA will do, is it will help to validate some of the concerns that people have about the actual measurable benefits. And on top of that, to offer wider reassurance, we've also built again through the Water Scarcity Group, supported by the Growth Company, we've built a dashboard that allows us to plot and manage changing circumstances in the water supply, water demand ratios to ensure that we can sit within the environmental constraints that are defined by abstraction at this point, but obviously when we see new sources of supply coming in. So it's just to reassure that there has been joint work around this, and to remind people that credits is not necessarily the retrofit.
No, thank you. You are quite correct. Apologies. So retrofitting is separate from the water credits. I think it was the water credits I have more concerns about. So you're quite right, Stephen. Thank you. Does anyone else? Oh, Councillor Thornborough, do you want to come back on that? And then Councillor Bennett, if everyone on committees, that's great. Councillor Thornborough.
I heard today at a meeting with Water Resources East, where Paul Leinster also chairs, that the Eddington recycling is going to be turned on in the new year as a public health trial, which is fantastic. So it'll be a major recycling of rain and grey water to be used in, say, flushing the toilet. So I don't know if you've had anything to do with that, but it's really great news. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that's all been through the water scarcity group, so it's partly us, but also partly local partners and everybody sort of working together to, as you say, do a pilot and make sure that we can do a test, and we're keen to have much more of that activity.
Thank you very much. I think no other questions from members of the committee. So, Councillor Bennett, would you like to speak? Thank you for waiting.
Thank you. I think we're all concerned that the Water Scarcity Group may have some good ideas, but there's a big difference between a thought experiment about how our water problems could be solved and actually a real-life implementation plan. And one of the particular problems I'm concerned about is skilled labour. We all know, those of us who live locally, how hard it is to get a plumber out. And also how old some of the plumbers are. It's quite a strenuous trade, but plumbers are telling me they cannot retire because there's nobody else coming through. And we were all very hopeful about the Marshall Skills Academy, which has unfortunately not proceeded. I understand that there's now a new Skills Academy plan with the NHBC, which sounds very hopeful, but realistically, it's not going to come online, and the people are not going to come out of that before we hit the crunch in 2030 on our water. So what can we all do to bring more skilled labour into the city, and particularly plumbers?
Thank you. I think, yeah, that around the skills and apprenticeship area. So if you have any comments.
I went recently to a big skills building centre in Hackney, and they are sort of spinning off and bringing in finance to run off many more. The Hill Group are running a very good one in Cambridgeshire. We are acutely aware that, let alone the plumbers to kind of mend your sink, that we need lots of plumbers and bricklayers and carpenters, and it's absolutely something that we must get our arms around. And it's also part of the answer to people who feel left behind and haven't got careers. So it's central.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've got a sudden resurgence of questions. Councillor Davey and Councillor Clough.
It's actually, forgive me, in response to Councillor Bennett, the Mayor is responsible for that at the moment. That's his job. That's what he gets paid to do. That's what he has. I think it's somewhere in the region, I looked at Hugh, somewhere in the region of £50 million a year to invest. He's well aware of the skills need and shortage that's likely to come in Cambridge. And in answer to Councillor Bennett's question, I think the first thing we need to do is write to the Mayor, Councillor Bennett.
I have already.
Well, I think, yeah, obviously, and I'm sure we'll all be happy for Cambridge Growth Company to support any efforts we have in encouraging the Mayor or whoever's budgets we can access to encourage skills. You know, it's particularly in the new local plan, we've got policies for, you know, employment and work skills advisors for all of the big sites, you know, bringing people in. So I think that's certainly something I would hope you would consider building on. Councillor Clough, so I'm losing track of who's asked.
Not really wanting to rush into defence of Paul Bristow too much, but I would also say that having attempted to scrutinise the budgets up at the CPCA, things are very tight up there, and I think the reality is until they become an established combined authority, things will run very tight on the skills front, and indeed I think providing additional funding for them to actually achieve what they need to achieve is probably a priority that should be registered. So, you know, until they're established, they're not necessarily going to have all the money they want, and therefore something's got to be done, I would suggest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions, so I'll do my usual summary. We're nearly on the last item, we're pleased to know. So we talked about what happens if, obviously, the water runs out and we can't build more, and obviously how you're going to take that into account. We talked about that retrofitting projects are moving forward, but the water credits are a little less clear at the moment. So that idea of being that they need to deliver before we are allowing them to build out sites. I mentioned the NEC, just that focus on how we can protect that potentially for more housing in the future, were it to come forward in a different state from as it is now. Talked about the need for apprenticeships and skills and working with the CPCA mayor, but obviously using your influence and potentially funding to assist with that, because as you say, in order to build at pace, we need skilled workers to do that. And I think that was everything. I can't see anyone dissenting. So I'm very pleased. We've got to the last part, which is any areas not covered above. I mean, I feel like we have covered lots, and then we'll come to ward councillors after that. So does anyone have anything we haven't covered? Councillor Dale, thank you.
It's a lucky dip, this one, isn't it? So I was at an event recently on the Science Park where there were a number of innovators and investors discussing, Cambridge, and effectively, So effectively, it was noted that almost every investor wants to know how our startups, basically what their plan is to move to Silicon Valley. That seems to be, we're more an incubator than somewhere where they're building a long-term future. I just wondered, do you have any thoughts or views on how that might change, so that ultimately the fruits of Cambridge's innovation grow here?
I think that our mandate is, in a sense, a physical mandate for space and infrastructure. But in parallel with that, Patrick Vallance and the various sort of investment ministries and government in terms of financial incentives, tax reliefs and whatever, have to make it a stronger climate for innovation and growth. When I went to Boston with the universities to look at innovation hubs there were 64 for private equity firms in the Boston downtown area, Kendall Square, and there's kind of one or two here. So you're absolutely right, it's something that needs to be worked on in parallel. And I think government really knows that, and I think Patrick Vallance is the right man for the job.
Thank you very much. I had Councillor Gawthorpe Wood next, and then Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Just a quick one. The UK Regional Economic Infrastructure Fund, that now, do you get direct, or will you get some direct funding from them, or will it go through the mayoralty? Please.
So we won't get direct funding from that. Our sort of funding is directly negotiated via Treasury. So obviously if Treasury choose to, how they allocate it, but the Development Corporation, particularly a centrally led development corporation, would be directly working with Treasury to secure budgets.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Thanks. A bit of a big picture question. So you've spoken tonight about the role of a future DevCo being, what you would expect, you really leaning into those large sites of major development. But in other areas, you've talked about kind of providing a vision for the greater Cambridge area. I'm just wondering how you think about those two ideas. Do you see your role ultimately as providing a sort of vision for growth and development for the entire area? Or do you think in reality what you'll be doing is providing a vision on specific sites and the needs and the infrastructure needs for those specific sites?
I think there's a sort of join up, and if you think of the individual sites as a heart or a foot, there's got to be arteries and veins that link them, and I think we should use our powers, our budget, our vision, our longevity, our ability to deal with landowners. So the sort of ideas that the Wildlife Trust has, which are never going to become a reality in a month of Sundays without somebody sort of in the middle. The amount of land they need and the amount of money they need is probably kind of 0.1% of the value, the cost of the programme the government would like us to make happen. And we ought to be able to find that 0.1% for them, but I'm not sure anybody else would.
Thank you very much. Do any other members have questions? I think Councillor Thornborough, did you want to say something?
This is about transport and modal shift. I think one benefit of the Cambridge South Station being delayed is it gives more time for the Addenbrooks and CBC to negotiate a huge reduction on the train fares. So I wonder if you're looking at analysing transport and movement, could you look at how many people, employees who already travel to Addenbrooks, how many need to move to travel by train before it makes a real difference to the congestion in that area? Because Stansted have negotiated a 70% discount on their train fares. And I think collectively that CBC, Addenbrooks could do something collectively. And maybe on day one of the South Cambridge Station opening, it would be a transformational shift, and maybe the congestion in that area will be different. The other modal shift that is happening is the Tiger Pass, which is a £1 bus fare for 25-year-olds and under, is transforming South Cambs and Cambridge City phenomenally. But it's under pressure to change, because the more successful it is, the more it costs the combined authority. And for Cambridge, we really need to save it until franchising comes in. And then under franchising, it could be something like this could be part of the franchising. But for Cambridge, I'm speaking out for Cambridge to try and how can we ensure that this Tiger Pass continues, because I've never seen such a modal shift for young people as this. Thank you.
I think we'd be happy to see how we can help and support that.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions we haven't already covered? I don't see any hands up. So quick summary. We talked about how we can keep innovation in Cambridge and save it moving away. I think you mentioned you couldn't access the infrastructure funds because your funding was coming nationally. Councillor Garner-Cliff mentioned the vision, how important that is for strategic sites and to tie in with our wider sites. I think that's a fair summary, hopefully. Sorry. Sorry. And we talked about transport and that idea of these modal shifts and whether you can use your weight as CGC to try and negotiate some of those discounts and things like the Tiger Pass, which we really do need to make sustainable travel really embedded, and how some of I think Councillor Thornborough said Tiger Pass has already done that, and Cambridge South hopefully will make huge changes to the Addenbrooke site if they can incentivise their staff to use it. We are very shortly coming to our 3-hour guillotine. We can extend, but I know we have 2 ward councillors here. So I think Councillor Blackburn-Hogan had her hand up first, and then Councillor Bajan, are you wishing to ask a question as well? Yes, you are. Okay. Brevity, if possible, as I would. Yes. So brevity would be brilliant. So Councillor Blackburn-Hogan.
So thank you very much. My question falls into 3 parts. So being allocated resources in 2025 to produce a growth company plan of how to develop Cambridge and Greater Cambridge over the next 3 decades, when will the full plan be available with clear timeframes, tangible and measurable targets? The Advisory Council has been established. Where is the transparency and engagement for this with those that reside, train, work and travel through for services such as the NHS? What plans do you have in place and with who to broker private sector loans for infrastructure for coherent areas? With this in mind, what plans are in place and timescales for the growth company to go through the transformation to become a development company? Lastly, being a Queen Edith Ward councillor and resident, learning lessons from 3 decades of piecemeal development on the biomedical side, whereby a coherent area has not been delivered. In fact, unintended negative consequences of growth have been significantly felt by those communities the site sits within. Without a neighbourhood impact report, which was committed to by CUH Mike Moore, Chair of Governors in February 2024, opportunities for locals and young people for skills, training, apprenticeship, homes not HMOs, overspill, negative consequences of growth have not been mitigated for. How will the growth company do things differently? Residents
Councillor Blackburn, can I encourage you to be as brief as possible, please?
This is literally the last paragraph. Residents and workers living in and coming to Cambridge need to feel the community benefits of development, and it is important that growth is planned strategically rather than piecemeal to avoid unintentional negative and overspill consequences from the CBC site. We need to include coordinated opportunities for young people, training and apprenticeships, and also ensure we have decent homes, recognising HMOs have a place, but in the CBC site, a recent housing report stated 86% asked for homes, not HMOs, for building balanced communities. How would the Cambridgeshire Growth Company do this?
Thank you. I think in summary, Councillor Blackburn-Hogarth was asking about timescales, the advisory council involving workers, private sector loans, how we avoid piecemeal development. I think she mentioned CBC, but I think that applies across the piece, which I think you have picked up on previously, and community benefits. So if you have any comments, please go ahead.
I think we're happy to sort of come back in more detail on email if that's helpful, but just to pick up on a few of them, timescales, obviously we've already discussed tonight that it's a ministerial decision around the timing of a consultation for the Development Corporation, and obviously as part of that and the approach to planning powers, etc., that will start to set out those timeframes. In terms of the advisory council, Peter ran through at the beginning the representation we have, but we have discussed with the advisory council members expanding that and starting to bring on board additional voices. So that will be something that's constantly under review with the advisory council. And in terms of the sort of private sector leverage, we're doing quite a lot of work with Homes England and also its role in terms of becoming a puffin, which is a public sector finance institution that will further enable that sort of interface and leveraging of private sector investment. So we're really keen to ensure that we maximise our position within Homes England at the moment to use some of their expertise in that area. And I think in terms of the piecemeal development, obviously when looking at CBC, as Stephen knows, we were very supportive of a comprehensive approach to that site, and we put that into the written ministerial statement in May 24. So hopefully that addresses just a few of the points, but we're quite happy to follow up if there's anything missing.
Thank you very much. No, that's fine. I think you did cover quite a bit of that in the presentation as well and in the questions. Councillor Bajan.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of points and then a main point, I suppose. Our city is suffering from density rates. We get backland development. We have houses being built where they shouldn't be built, flats being built where houses were, demolition taking place where it's not necessary. We urgently need some plans laid out for where the new developments are going to be so that we can perhaps get people to stop building and making this city a more uncomfortable place to live in. And you've given us that opportunity, or the opportunity is coming. So I'm not being a bit NIMBY there. I think that's the way to go. I think the other point I want to make is that Councillor Gardner-Smith made about affordable housing. Affordable housing in Cambridge is not really affordable. We need more social rents. I would like to see us building 40% social rented homes. Big ask, but I think it's something I think we ought to be looking at. If we're interested in having people to do the less well-paid jobs, then we need to provide homes for those people. My major point, and I will be brief, it's not going to be long, I've been very impressed by what you've talked about in regards to infrastructure. But this city is on the cusp of gridlock. We really are in a difficult position regarding traffic. Lots of people, or I'm told by lots of the companies, the high-tech companies, that lots of people won't come to Cambridge because it's too congested. They're not prepared to spend 2 hours travelling to get to work. So there's an important thing here. And this is where you have the greatest of opportunities, because in regards to infrastructure, we are going to need a new method of transport around, or a new style or a new idea. I mean, I don't necessarily think that light rail and all those things are necessarily very a good idea, but we need to get the cars off the road. And we have discovered, I've got to declare an interest in a way. I spent 3 years on the GCP designing a programme to reduce cars in Cambridge, and along with other people in this room, I bear the scars on my back from that. The reality was that the car lobby was so strong. They brought in political leverage and it became untenable. Now, that's a problem with the GCP. That was
Councillor Bajan, could I encourage you, we've got 1 minute before the guillotine, so I'd be really grateful so you can get your answers. Otherwise, we're going to have to vote to carry on the meeting.
I thought the idea of these meetings was that we would have more scrutiny, but still, what more can I say? I'm being shut down now. So...
Not at all, Councillor, I just can't continue under the Constitution unless I take a vote.
I'm not saying any more. I think Peter gets my point.
I think, yeah, we've got your point. You were talking about the density in the city, affordable social rents, transport. I'm proposing, members, as we are
really
now...
unfair.
We are now at the guillotine. Are members happy to... I continue very briefly, I assume, to allow answers for Councillor Bajan's questions. And we'll just very briefly look at the work plan after that. So, Councillor Bajan, just to reassure you, you're not being shut down. I'm continuing the meeting so your questions can be answered. Of course.
Can I ask a question you may say is not appropriate to ask? How many of the councillors in the room were in favour of this congestion charge? Is that an embarrassing question or not?
I think, no. Yeah. That was the majority, I would say, originally. But I can't speak for other councillors. Who was in? How many of the councillors were in favour of some kind of sustainable
Hands up if you were in favour of the congestion charge, I guess is the question.
For the revised scheme that never got
yes,
debated.
I think with the congestion charge, it
sort of slightly under half.
Yes, there were two. There was an original scheme that was reconsulted on, then it came back as a revised scheme and then was withdrawn, I think. But I don't know if Councillor Davies is going to correct me on that.
That's right.
Another time, Mike.
The revised scheme went to the GCP, and before it was debated, it was just couldn't proceed.
Couldn't come forward. Go, Councillor Davies. You probably know a lot more about this. Go for it.
I was on the GCP board at the time, and we never got to debate what was on that due to a withdrawal of support from, without wishing to open up a can of worms, a number of politicians across. Jamie's being very honest. A number of politicians. Across the thing, and the revised scheme we had gone through it within. So there was, I think, as Katie's indicating, without opening up a kind of worms, the majority in this room were probably in favour of the revised scheme.
The revised scheme was slightly different, and it had fewer hours and more exemptions, etc. But it didn't, unfortunately, come to a point where it's debated. So it's a slightly difficult question to answer because we weren't given the opportunity for GCP to put the revised scheme through. But I think it's fair to say from the discussions at both, City and from what I observed at South Council and at the Joint Cabinet, because the new local plan is based on some of these travel routes and the idea that we do need to encourage sustainable travel, that was generally agreed across the board, I would say, in terms of sustainable travel and allowing our residents affordable and greener ways to travel, whether that's walking, cycling, buses, light rail, whatever else you want to add into the mix. I think I'm not seeing any... Oh, Councillor Bennett, do you disagree with me?
We would have supported a workplace levy. We would have supported pay for mile based on MOT records. We tried very hard, as Lynn will remember, to try and find ways to make the congestion charge better.
I think we're probably moving into slightly different debate here, and I think obviously I'm mindful Councillor Bajan would probably want for some answers to his questions, if that's okay. So I don't know if you wanted, if you were
but there
okay
certainly
to come
wasn't
back.
Universal cross-party support.
Okay, but I think for the new local plan we're supportive of sustainable travel. Generally, I think that's a fair comment to say. I'm seeing nodding. Okay, Stephen, do go ahead.
Can I just clarify, in case there's any confusion or any uncertainty, the local plan is not being specific in terms of measures, and I just want to be clear on that point.
Yes, apologies. I wasn't suggesting a sustainable travel zone.
Charge is associated with the local plan. It's not.
My apologies, I didn't mean that. I meant in terms of the more general principles of strategic transport links rather than any particular plan like that.
We recognise that it is probably the knottiest problem, and I have talked to 15 different strategic transport experts before agreeing to appoint the one who we will announce shortly. So it's very early days for us, but we recognise it's absolutely central.
Thank you very much. And I think Councillor Bagent mentioned affordable and social rents. I think you have touched on that already. I didn't know if you want to say anything else about that other than you've already said no. I think that's covered everything. Okay, can I thank everyone very much? Just very briefly, the final item is our work plan. I would just advise members to look at the work plan. If there's something on it you don't agree with or something you want to add on to it, particularly around housing and the task and finish group, because nobody's come back to me to suggest we want to progress with that, but please do contact myself and Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood and Democratic Services if there are things you want to add. And next up, I think January, we have the budget. It's another really nice short meeting for us. So can I thank the Cambridge Growth Company, Peter, Beth and all your colleagues and Anthony online as well, because it's been really helpful. I'm very glad we have brought it in less than 3.5 hours, albeit with a minor extension. And thank to the Cabinet members and members of the committee, leaders of opposition and everyone who's been here tonight, because I hope that's been really helpful and you've been able to hear the concerns, and to Officer Stephen Lynn for all their work pulling all of this together with us. Thank you very much. Can I ask Sarah if you could